You're listening to episode 262 of the Comics Pals. We're a group of comic journalists and friends who record a podcast together because we don't talk enough about comics in our daily lives.
Well, it's the day before All Hallows Eve. And is that not true?
It's the day after.
Is All Hallows Eve not October 31st?
No, it's Halloween Eve. Today's Hallows Eve.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Thank you. See, when we record the show, we record it 2 days before it releases.
I was thinking about the release.
Okay. And I figured we could start things a little differently this time. I've been feeling very spooky lately. I was really just wondering between the five of us, because we have a full set of pals here today, if anyone has any spooky stories or spooky memories or things they just couldn't explain throughout their life that they would want to share today.
Go ahead, Gil.
I do have one.
Okay.
Okay, I can try to keep this as short as possible. So one time I was out riding my bike in like the furthest parts of Amarillo, where I'm from, and where I live in Texas is flat, nothing out there for miles. So you can see a storm coming when it comes, unless you can't. And this time a storm it hit just the highest, tallest, darkest clouds you could, that you've ever seen. Thunder, lightning, just assaulting rain. And I got stuck in it, riding my bike, maybe 10, 11 or so is how old I was. What a lot of people don't know is there is an abandoned Buddhist monastery at the edge of town. Don't know the story behind it. All I know is that it is abandoned and it's there. So I was out. I knew I was by this monastery, so I turned the corner on this muddy road and went and hid in this monastery from the rain. And because it was such a heavy and intense storm, I knew I'd be there a while, right? So I started snooping around. Looked through the kitchen, nothing there. Went up the first floor, mostly bedrooms, old mattresses and sort of the sort of metal springy cots, just, rusted, left to waste or whatever. Nothing too, conspicuous or anything. So I went up to the attic. And this is where things got weird. In the attic was just a chest, just like a box, like a hope chest.
That's a bad sign.
And you bet your ass I went right to it. So with the rain, it was pounding on the roof, just pounding. And I could, there were windows, on the slanted roof that was being illuminated by the lightning. I opened the lid of this chest, and there was a dude in it.
Wait, what?
A full ass skeleton.
Oh no!
What?
And I swear to God, he reached up and he grabbed my leg and he pulled it, just like I'm pulling yours.
If you want more monster fiction from Kale, head to kaleward.com.
It's maybe not that creepy, but this one time at one of my older houses, I was maybe 12, and our parents were throwing a party, like a family event, and all of the kids were just in the basement because the adults are drinking and dancing and stuff, and so we're all hanging out. It gets to be 2, 3 in the morning. We're all getting sleepy, so we pull out, covers. We open up the sofas, get ready just to go to bed. And I had gone to bed in one particular corner of the basement, and I noticed that there was a spider web up top, and a spider sort of just like circling around it. So I was like, all right, hopefully it doesn't nothing happens, it doesn't fall on me or anything. And we all go to bed, and that night I felt like, probably because I was worried about the spider, like these tingly sensations and all this stuff. And the next morning when I wake up, the spider's not there, and so I'm freaking out. Oh, maybe it did like crawl all around and stuff. And but then I realized that because it had moved away from the center of the web, there was a ball there, and it was a ball. And I like went up closer to figure out what it was. It was an egg, and during the night, the thought was that the egg had, like, the baby spiders had come out, because my other cousins that were in the basement, and like that next morning, were finding like little spiders around the floor.
Oh,
so that night I presumably gotten covered with baby spiders that had just given birth.
that is like truly a nightmare that I've had. I don't have like a real spooky story, but that reminded me of like the worst nightmare I've ever had. It was like, so when my parents got divorced, right, and my mom like moved all the stuff out of the house that I grew up in, and this is like maybe like 2-3 years after that point. And I had a dream that it was then that she was like packing things up and taking them out, and she was like, hey, like, Pete, come here, I have a box with a bunch of stuff of yours, I want you to see if you want any of it. So I go into the hallway, I pick up this box and open it, and just a bunch of giant spiders just start like Cthulhuing out and just on top, like, eating me. And like I remember waking up with like my heart pounding like so hard, and I've never ever had a nightmare like that. It was like so intense.
Well, that's your superhero origin story. That's how you become Spider-Man.
Pete becomes Spiders Man.
Yeah, I was gonna say spiders, man. I'm just made of all these spiders. Because
Once, similar to Pete, I had a dream right around the time my parents got divorced. My dad and I were in our kitchen, and I could hear my mom screaming down the hall in the bathroom. This is a dream, by the way. Could hear
Why
her.
are we telling our dreams right now? What the fuck is this?
It's scary.
Not scary.
Well, not yet. I haven't gotten there.
so I found this skeleton, right?
So she's screaming down the hall. So I go to see what's going on, and I peek into the bathroom, and I can see her face in the bathroom. And do you guys remember from Batman the Animated Series when the guy turns into the Man Bat?
Mhm.
Yeah.
My mom does this in the bathroom,
good.
like right in front of me.
Great.
And then she turns around and she grabs my leg just like it. No, that I have had that nightmare though. That's yeah.
Wow.
Well, okay.
So let's see. We got 2 dreams, a fake story, and a story about spiders maybe possibly crawling over someone's body. Great stuff.
Where's
Sean,
your
do you-
spooky story, Hotshot?
John, do you have
I
one?
didn't. This isn't my bit, dude. I didn't claim I had a scary story.
Well,
I came
You're
here to
gonna
talk
sit here
about
and criticize
comics.
ours like you didn't bring nothing to the table.
I didn't tell you to bring something to the table, Mr. Dreamland. Who the fuck are you afraid of, Freddy Krueger?
I'm afraid of absolutely everything. Are you kidding me?
I'm
You hear the
afraid-
stories I just told?
I'm afraid of the scary quality of this podcast right now. Go ahead. Tom. I thought you had something to say there.
Sure. I can tell one real quick. I remember when I was a kid, I would stay at a log cabin in the woods in Jersey. And when we would stay there in the attic, we were always told not to go up there. But in the attic, I did go up there anyway, of course, because I was curious. There was a bed and a chest for the person who lived there and died there. That's what we were told. Like the person that previously lived there before it became a log cabin to be rented out, died there several years before. So every night while I was staying there, I would hear bumping and thumping in the attic. And I would look because we had a dog with us. It was my cousin's. I would look at the dog to see if the dog was reacting, but the dog would never react. So I thought, this is fine. I'm going to go to bed. I'd wake up in the morning. There would be these little like stuffed animals that were lined on the stairs leading to the main floor of the house, and they were all knocked on the floor. And this happened for 4 straight nights. So finally, we go up to the attic, and I had found out that my parents had put a bunch of stuff up there for storage. And so, they heard it too. So we took all the stuff that we had put up there for storage back downstairs. And all of a sudden, the rest of the time we were there for the next week, there were no more bumps and thumps in the night.
Wild.
Yeah.
I
It
lost
seems like,
track of that.
well, it seemed like whoever was the previous occupant was mad that we had put stuff in his room.
Ah,
So
I see. Okay.
I like the idea that this ghost like wakes up to go through his normal haunting routine, and it's like he's like a parent like walking through a living room and like stepping on a Lego, like, son of a bitch, like, clean up your shit.
yeah, and every morning these little stuffed animals that were lying on the stairs would be knocked over until the stuff in the attic was removed. They were no longer knocked over.
There you go.
All right. I'll tell one.
Yes.
Here we go.
This story happened when I was about 8 years old. I had a neighbor, a downstairs neighbor. I lived on the 3rd floor. This family lived on the 2nd, and I used to stay there a lot. I used to get picked up by them after school and stuff like that. On this particular day, my mother was not around, so I had to stay there a bit longer. And I was told to go check to see if my mom was home, to go knock on the door of my house and check. So I left. I went upstairs. I rang the bell. I got nothing. And so I went down the stairs, and as I'm going back to the apartment, so my apartment is on the, let's say, the left side of the building. The apartment I'm going to is on the right side. So I go down the stairs. I'm walking to the right side, and as I'm walking past the staircase, on that end, coming up is a guy. So I'm a very scared child. So I'm like, who's this? But I just keep walking until I notice that he's looking at me.
Oh, no.
And then I stop moving, and he stops moving. He stops walking up the stairs. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I run. I run up the steps that were there, and he chases me.
Mm-mm.
I run two stories up to the 4th floor, and then I dart across the way to go down the other side of steps, thinking that somehow I'm going to avoid this. At some point in all the running, I realize that there's no one behind me.
Nope.
So I go knock on my door again. I buzz, I knock, and of course I don't get a response. So I wait, and I don't hear any movement in the building at all. I'm like, okay, maybe the coast is clear. So I go back to where I was before. I go back to the family friend's apartment, and the woman says, oh, no one was home. And I said, no one was home, and someone just chased me in the hallway. And she's like, oh my God, that's horrible. Are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. So I walk into the living room, and the guy is there. And he looks at me, and he smiles at me, and he says, I was just having a bit of fun.
What the fuck?
Mm-mm.
Ever since then, I have had dreams of being chased my entire life.
Can bet.
Dude, adults are so fucked up with shit like that. Like, Sarah has a lifelong fear of sharks because her dad held her out over the Jaws ride, and now she's afraid of sharks forever. It's like, you can't fucking scare little kids like that, man. Give them a lifelong fear.
Who did this guy end up being, Sean?
He was just a family friend.
Just some
Yeah, he was.
Wild.
And I would go on to see him quite a bit after that. That wasn't the last time I saw him by any means, but yeah, I didn't know who he was at the time, and it freaked me out.
Did that like make you forever like think that guy was like did you like associate him with being scared, or did you eventually just like be like, okay, I know this person?
I got over it.
Yeah.
I got over it with that guy, but like I said, the dreams never stopped. I have had, well, they don't happen anymore, but I used to have dreams of myself being chased by the Green Goblin in Central Park.
Sure.
Come here, Sean man.
That's a real nightmare.
So, Kale, just out of curiosity, do I win?
No, I think Phil's was the most supernatural, the
paranormal,
most spooky. Yeah.
Can't explain whatever that was.
Sean's was actually scary though. It was chased by a man.
Yeah, like if the guy had never shown up, nobody knew who he was or whatever, you might have taken it. But
well, no, it'd be like Sean shows up at his family friend's apartment and explains the story, but then on the wall he sees a picture of the man.
Yeah. There hasn't been a man here in 40 years.
Listeners, write in and say who you thought won. We have a lot of show to do today. It is Halloween tomorrow for us. For you guys, it's already passed, but of course, we are still in the spirit, as you just heard. But we're also in the spirit of giving and the spirit of receiving. So if you want to support the show, you can do so by writing to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com, leaving us a follow, a rating, a review, wherever it is that you're listening to us. Get us on YouTube at The Comics Pals, youtube.com/thecomicspals. Subscribe for free, like the video, share it with your friends. All that stuff's free to do, and it helps us out a lot more than it costs you. Check out our New York Comic Con interviews, which are still rolling on YouTube. Give us your feedback on that. Listen to our comic book reviews. We did an in-depth analysis this week of Inferno #2. We also talked about the Long Halloween special #1, keeping things real spooky on the review show. So check that out.
Great set of books.
Yes, absolutely. And then make sure you guys listen to Journey into Quistery, episode 3. Tyler finished getting married. That was the longest marriage ever. And he's back. So we did that, and it was fun. We had on the creative team behind the Bardic Verses. And that was pretty cool. Kale and
they were
I,
fun,
yeah, they were a lot of fun. You guys might be hearing from them on here pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. And then also the Eternals book club, that was a really good one. Go check that out. Obviously the movie comes out next week, Friday, and so we'll be reviewing that. If you want to hear that, make sure that you guys tune in on next Monday, to hear us talk about the Eternals movie. If you want to hear us talk about the Eternals book club, go on and check that out. I don't think you need to have read the book in order to enjoy our book club. Give that a shot. Let us know. Did it work for you? Were you able to get sort of the idea of the book through our conversation? Here's one person who wrote in and had his idea of the book. Pete, why don't you read this first listener comment?
This first one comes from Torsten over on YouTube, who wrote in and said, there are two sides of the coin with Gaiman's Eternals. It's a good story and a good read. On the other side, his interpretation probably hurts continuity more than it moves it forward. I'm torn, as I like his writing, but I hate what he does to the characters. Kirby's original run is still unchallenged.
Well, I wouldn't know that. Unfortunately, I haven't read the original run, but I've been thinking about this Eternals that we did a book club for. Since we did it, it's one of my greatest examples of a missed opportunity in storytelling. And so I've been a little frustrated, but also fascinated by that. I wonder if there's more to the story behind the scenes than we necessarily know about why it came out the way it did.
You know, it brings up Jack Kirby's run, and I feel like the popular discourse around Jack Kirby's kind of career and his bibliography is that the Eternals was kind of his weakest production that he did throughout his entire comic book career.
Really?
That's my kind of colloquial understanding of his career, is that like his Eternal stuff is like the least interesting thing he did.
Huh.
My understanding is that the Eternals are basically a sort of technological stand-in for the Inca people. And so like everything that like the Inca people accomplished, there's no way they couldn't have done it without the Eternals.
Okay.
Things like that.
Interesting. Well, we're going to be talking more about the Eternals a little later as we talk about the current Rotten Tomatoes score for that movie and why it is actually remarkable and a landmark of some kind. We're also going to be talking about the villain of Batgirl, who is Brendan Fraser, and what we can expect from that.
Just
George of the
Brendan
Jungle?
Fraser.
Oh yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The
Welcome
guy
back.
from The Mummy.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, Brendan.
Yes. Iron Fist is getting a new series and a new main character. And that's going to dovetail into our main topic this week about the state of diversity in the comics industry. We've talked a lot about diversity on this show, more so I feel like in earlier years than recent, but we got a request to do this topic, and also just the fact that I think there is a lot of meat on the bone right now. So we'll be diving into that a little bit later on. But Pete, why don't you jump us back into the listener comment?
Sure. So we got another one from Garrett Harshman. This is on episode 261, who wrote in and said, as an indie book rebooted, I'd love to see Cy Spurrier write Hellboy with art by Ben Templesmith.
This was a good one.
Yep.
This is a really good
That is
one.
a good one.
And stay tuned because Cy Spurrier has a new book coming out in 2 weeks. Or like the announcement comes out soon.
Like, stay tuned because this book exists.
That would have been great.
How do you guys feel about the idea of different creative teams taking on, like, we've talked about it with Spawn, but the idea of taking on long-standing creative-owned like properties, like Mike Mignola Hellboy, or Todd McFarlane's Spawn. Does it ever feel kind of weird to you, the idea of like other creative teams taking on something that a creator did for like 10, 15, 20 years?
I think
It depends.
yeah, that's what I was going to say, Sean.
Yeah.
Like, Pete, you love Invincible. What if someone else took it over?
Invincible's, I think, actually an interesting example to illustrate how I feel about it. Because if you were ever at any point reading Invincible month to month, or you heard Robert Kirkman talk about it when the series was ending, his plan was actually always to do that, was to eventually hand off the book when he and Ryan were done with it and let somebody else continue it. And I remember he used to joke that his vision for the series was that he and Ryan would be sitting in a retirement home being like, I can't believe how these kids fucked up Invincible. And that's like kind of how properties should exist in comics. Obviously, that's not what ended up happening, right? Like, he ended the book when he felt that they had reached a natural conclusion. And I feel like that is kind of where the line is for me, is like with a story like Invincible, which has a very clear like arc, or multiple arcs, but like it has a clear kind of beginning, middle, and end when you really break it down. It's complete. It's done. I don't really feel like there's much you can do with it aside from just like telling a different story, which at that point it's a different book, or, I guess retreading ground, which I don't feel like is, again, like what's the point of that, right? That's kind of what they're doing with the cartoon, right? Whereas with Hellboy is a character that I feel like lends itself to like a more anthological type of storytelling, where I feel like you could reboot it, you could not reboot it, and just tell new stories and be like, yeah, this happened at some point in Hellboy's career. I think when you have a framing device like that, it's easier to get away with, like, we're going to do an all-new interpretation. We're going to do an all-new #1 or something like that. Whereas I think certain other properties where, like, it's very based around, like, moments, right? Like, the reveal in Invincible, right? Or, like, you know, some of the other beats in that story. I feel like that's where it gets less interesting. Because it's like you're either forced to reinvent the wheel or kind of pigeonhole yourself. And I think that the best, like, reboots or adaptations or whatever are not either of those things. It's somewhere in between, right? Where you can tap into what's special about it. You can maybe even revisit things, but you can do it in a new way, or you can really meaningfully add to things by, you know, taking the character in new directions, right? Like, that's every superhero that's been written for forever. If you can boil it down to those, you know, core elements and, like, what is Hellboy in 2 or 3 sentences, I feel like that those are the characters and the properties that lend themselves to that kind of treatment.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't work for stories where the narrative is kind of closed. You know, Invincible has a closed narrative, whereas Spawn has an open one. The next arc of Spawn could take him in a totally different direction, and it really doesn't necessarily matter who writes it, because the idea of Spawn is bigger than whatever it is that Todd is doing in this particular moment. Whereas something like, let's say, you know, Rick Remender's Low is an extremely tight story with a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
Hellboy has no end.
I was thinking of, like, a joke where you're like, well, it doesn't matter what they do in Spawn because Todd ... is going to fuck it up anyway.
And that's his right. But yeah, like,
Moving right along.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Take on the next.
Oh, right. Yeah. So this next one comes from definitely not Sean Soapbox on episode 260, who wrote in and said, yes, Superman, the non-American fictitious alien created by 2 Jewish legends. Nothing showcases American Christianity better.
Once again, not Sean Soapbox, just right on the nose. Every time they write in, they're spot on.
Yeah, brilliant.
Absolutely. Definitely Not is one of my favorite listeners by far.
This next one comes from Harris on Journey into Quistery episode 3. Man, this is an episode where I would have bombed on everything except for the tomato meter and the last category. This seemed like something Marco would have killed in points.
You fucking watch me do it live. It was this one was hard.
Harris flatters me. No. I'm terrible at it.
It's a tough
game. This was a difficult one. If you tune in, you can watch me draw what they said was a dick.
A penis, yeah.
His penis.
What it was, I actually have the drawing right next to me. For some reason, I haven't thrown it out. But it wasn't a penis. It was actually a misplaced stroke of my pen.
Stroke is right.
Misplaced stroke, you know what I'm saying? Ha-cha-cha.
You know, if Paul Dano doesn't work in the Batman film, I think Tyler is a great, understudy for the Riddler based on how he fucking confuses and trip people up in these games.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, can we acknowledge now that happened a week ago, Kale, that you kind of cheated?
Excuse me?
We're talking about episode 1 again, or did Kale cheat in
No,
episode
we're
3?
talking about episode 3. and you know what? I shouldn't even. That's bad framing. You thought outside the box. You did something that wasn't against the rules, but it wasn't intended to be a legal move. Where you drew symbols.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, come on.
They were symbols. They're pictures. They're not.
Even Tyler said
I did not write words. They were
come
pictures. I have the picture right here. I'll show you.
Wow, you both are just keeping them close by.
Yep.
So,
look, is that a part of the Swamp Thing character? I don't know.
Marco, what do you think?
Are those words or are those pictures?
Sure, I heart trees.
Those are symbols.
Yeah.
Okay. What's a picture?
I don't know, man.
I don't feel like that's cheating.
Even Tyler said it.
I mean, Tyler's got to write the rules down then, bro. Like,
I want to hear from the swamp
think-
expert.
Yeah, I think you're just mad you didn't come up with a game and can't define the rules.
Marco, what do you think?
Looks like a legal move to me.
Oh, interesting.
Kale,
Okay.
Kale,
He said no letters. You can't write words. I didn't write words.
Kale, you gotta mail Marco that drawing so he can add it to his Swamp Thing collection.
Yeah, I need it on the wall over here.
Hang that.
He's gonna be real mad when I do.
I'm gonna have to have a chat with the person who hosts that game. We're gonna have to work some things out.
It sounds like the second straight or the 2 out of the 3 games he's screwed you over somehow.
Well, yeah, but I didn't feel personally screwed over. I just felt like the integrity of the game was shaky.
compromised.
Shaky.
Yeah.
All right. Our last comment of the day here comes from Grayson Red on our Nicholas Draper Ivy interview, who wrote in and said, "Great interview, man. Damn, New York Comic Con seems like it was amazing this year."
It sure was, Grayson. It was a very good time. I think the fact that there were less people allowed it to be a little bit more intimate, and there were some great creators there. You know, there was a lot of talk about how, it's going to be light this year, and all of that. But a lot of really talented people showed up, and I think that from what I was able to gather, they had a lot of really good interactions with fans.
Yeah, I know, like, anecdotally, I remember a friend of the show, Plaid Klaus, had said that, like, he sold more copies of his book on day one than he had in, like, the previous weekend. So,
Oh hell yeah!
less people, but it seemed like people were more engaged. It was easier to stop and look at things and browse, and I'm sure that helped creators, be able to pitch their books, which is great.
Yep. So, you want to talk about spooky?
Yes.
Let's talk about a very spooky time in the history of DC Comics.
The present.
Well, not quite. We actually have to go back to the time that Kale was young and raging.
The 1850s.
DC Comics was
Close.
around in 1764.
Almost. We're going back to the olden days of 1970.
Ooh.
Yes. Where Superman asked readers to rap.
Okay.
What I'm referring to is a survey that DC put out in 1970 that features Superman in Superman in his costume, which for some reason looks like a massive hoodie. It doesn't even look like a real Superman costume, but it says, "Let's rap. Here's a chance to tell us what you think about our comics. Tell us about yourself, and we can put out the comics you want." So Superman is, of course, breaking the fourth wall to ask us what kind of comics we want DC to publish. And I think you guys are going to want to see what one of these options are.
You gonna
I'm
share
gonna
your
go
screen
ahead-
here?
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so we can all.
Hell yeah.
I found the image of Superman saying "Let's rap," and wow. I feel like that needs to become a meme format. We just remove the second part of it and just put lyrics to rap songs.
Look at his costume. First of all, does that not look a little too bulky? Look at the neck area.
The neck area, it looks like he has a hood.
Yeah,
It looks like somebody threw. It looks like somebody threw a hoodie just over his shoulders.
Yeah. Or like those like bathrobes that they have that are like the superhero like insignia, but then they have the little hood on. Like
Yeah. It's whatchamacallit? It's his cape. It's Stephen Strange's cape. Look at that.
He's like so white that the way he starts any rap is like, "Well, my name is Superman, and I'm here to say I'm rapping here in a DC Comics way."
and so
Don't do drugs and fight the crime.
Whoa. Can we jump to question 5 here?
That's why we're doing this bit. actually. So as we go in,
no!
DC's trying to find out
Oh boy.
what kinds of comics the readers want. And so
Good
Flash
God.
is letting us know that they will be bribing us with a portable color TV set.
Ooh.
I have a very hard time believing that they're giving away 150 different portable color TVs. I think they're probably giving away one. But then Superman says, we're drawing the names on September 30th, 1970. Dig.
You dig.
Yes, Superman throwing out a you dig.
God, why did Superman doesn't talk like this?
No, he doesn't. Superman never says let's rap. Superman doesn't know what rap is.
Don't have these on Krypton.
The questions are pretty innocuous. You can tell that this was written directly toward children. One of the question is, who bought you this comic? Was it your parents? Was it you?
Is me one of the options? Yeah.
They're like, so it's a pretty regular questionnaire. The one question though, the question 5 that's most interesting is, how interested are you in reading about pollution, black people, space flights, national problems, city problems, sports?
Which one?
I like how it says sports, which one, and then there is no place for you to answer that.
Yeah, I don't know what you're supposed to do with that. Hobbies. Which hobbies?
Yeah, which one?
I'm very
Romance.
interested in reading about hobbies.
Superman
Romance
space?
or astrology. In
hobbies.
1970, these were the only things you could possibly talk about.
Write about a comic.
Yeah. These were
we
your
should-
options.
We should go back. We should go back.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we should narrow the scope of comics, is what I'm saying.
You know,
Sports,
okay.
which one?
I appreciate this. Actually reminds me of the interview, the episode where we had Ram V on the show, and Ram was talking about how there's like this conventional wisdom that there's only a few types of stories. Well, this is clear. There's so many more types of stories that are not on that list, right?
Oh no, there's
Are
like
there?
3. There's like 3 more on this list than there actually are in in literature.
Man versus man, hobbies.
National problems, city problems. You've got your pollution.
I
Man
like.
versus God, space flights.
It's also funny to me that it's black people, but no other kind of person. Like it's just
Yes.
Well, they were just invented, so like you had to.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you guys don't remember, but like, it was pretty big.
1969, big year, you know.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, if I'm filling out this checklist, I'm telling you right now, I'm very interested next to hobbies, because there's nothing I want to see more than a Flash have a stamp collection.
Well, I'm gonna check very interested on black people, city problems,
Yeah.
and space flights.
Nice.
Because I want to see Superman bring black people into space
Dig.
as test subjects to see what happens when you go to space. So Superman's just going to bring them up there on a space flight.
Regular Jeff Bezos.
And that'll deal with the city problems because now all the blacks are gone.
Oh no, Sean! Fuck.
I mean,
Uh,
just thinking in terms of the story, it's
2 birds.
those are the questions the readers will ask.
I gotta point out one more thing on this. On the first one, I got this comic at and one of them is from a friend, but then in parentheses it says or enemy.
So
Or lover.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. If you're watching on YouTube, you got the chance to see this amazing survey. I just think it's funny that I feel like a survey like this would probably yield. Well, we don't know the results of this survey, but I can imagine that Black people was not chosen as very interested too often. And I feel like the survey would have similar results today.
Yeah.
It's weird to see, not yourself. I'm not Black people, but I'm a Black person. And it's weird to see that there was a survey asking whether people wanted to know about, my people. And mind you, asking kids, right? Like this is clearly targeted at kids. You're asking kids if they want to hear about Black people.
I like the idea that these kids that like there's these kids that are like, you know what? Yeah, I do. I'm interested. Right. What's going on?
I'm just sick of this
fucked up little monsters that didn't.
I'm sick of this DC Comics PC culture in 1970. It's ruining our society.
Oh man, gotta love it.
DC and their forced inclusivity.
Good thing comics are more diverse today, right? Let's get into the Pals Pulls. From Marco, we have Swamp Thing. Marco and Pete, we have Swamp Thing number 9.
Swamp Thing's the book. Ron B, Mike Perkins. It's been really, really fun so far, and the art's been just crushing.
I'm sorry. Did you start that out by saying Swamp Thing is a book?
You sure did.
Okay, you know what?
Ass way of addressing it.
It says Swamp Thing is the book.
Oh, okay. It's the Swamp Thing, and it's the book that I'm saying you should pick up this week. There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
I mean, he's
Good
right.
stuff.
Yeah, no, the Swamp Thing is great. We've really been enjoying it. I mentioned earlier we had Ron V on the show a while back. We also interviewed Mike Perkins. That was a cutout one, so go check those out.
Pete chose Radiant Black number 9.
Yeah, I did. We talked a little bit about this on our New York Comic Con episode. We actually had the privilege of getting to read it early. We'll have our interview with Kyle Higgins up this week where he talked a little bit about it. So you're going to want to check this one out.
Yeah.
If you've been reading Radiant Black and you've been, on the fence or feeling like maybe things have been moving a little slowly, I think this issue will address a lot of your concerns.
Phil chose Primordial number 2.
Yeah, baby. This book is sick. So it is it's Jeff Lemire's new book, and it's about like the space race from the early 60s. It's got a lot of conspiracy, it's got animals in space, and the art is dope. Definitely worth reading.
Andrea Sorrentino.
Yes.
I got to tell you what, I don't know what the hell's going on in that book, but it's pretty cool.
Fucking cool. Yeah.
Kale chose Chilling Adventures in Sorcery number 1.
Guys, I think Archie Horror is back.
Yes.
So this time, Madam Satan is trying to escape hell. And guess who she finds? Archie and the gang.
Oh,
They're in hell?
They're in hell.
Why did they go to hell?
Yes, this is so good.
Don't they sin? Aren't they sinners?
Oh, Archie? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fair. You're right. Archie's
There's no way that asshole has the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in his heart.
That dude's a little adulterer.
Yeah.
All right. And then you also chose Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League.
All right. Now, did you guys know there are books? Comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down, Poindexter.
Take the comic away. No pictures.
Ugh.
I
Only
can't
words.
picture it.
No, I hate that.
So this book, put out by DC Dark Horse Comics, mind you, is the reason I was able to bring it, is a direct sequel to the Buckaroo Banzai film from the 80s. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Oh, yeah.
Written by the man who wrote that screenplay. It's a direct sequel. And I'm going to read the synopsis here. A prose adventure as told by the Reno Kid, Jeff Goldblum,
Yes.
What the fuck?
to Buckaroo Banzai chronicler E.M. Rausch. This tale follows everyone's favorite scientist, surgeon, entertainer, Daredevil, as he sets off on a brand new hair-raising adventure.
Oh, I love Jeff Goldblum.
Phil, have you seen Buckaroo Banzai?
No, it's like a movie that's been on my checklist for years.
Oh, man. I think you would like it a lot.
Yeah.
It's one of those 80s just crazy sci-fi adventures of like a guy who just does everything because why the fuck not?
Yeah, I've heard it's a lot of fun. I would love to watch that movie.
Yeah, it's incredible. It was the film that Jeff Goldblum came from. It was like his title, right? His premiere film, and he does absolutely nothing.
Well, of course, he was in Earth Girls Are Easy after that, which is another one.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. But
All right.
Yeah, good choice.
Marco and I chose Human Target #1.
Yes, Tom King. I'm here for another Tom King joint. Rorschach was fucking good. Let's get it, Tom King. I'm back on the train for him, and I'm ready for this book. Greg Smallwood, really fucking good.
The Tom Train.
The Tom Train.
I think Rorschach passed a lot of people by.
Mm-hmm.
It came out at a time where there wasn't a lot of confidence in Tom. But Human Target, now I think the wave is back in Tom's favor. So I think Human Target will bring a lot of people back in who were not so sure about him. I'm sure that this is going to be something to see for sure. I think this is going to be exciting. So I'm looking forward to it.
He always gets the artists, and Greg Smallwood is definitely one of those big, just good ass artists.
You know what excited a lot of people this week was the news that Brendan Fraser will play the villain in the Batgirl HBO Max movie. Now, do we all know who the villain is? Does anyone not know who he's playing?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Is it
Okay.
Batman?
Whoa.
Do you know, Phil?
No, I don't.
I love that.
Why don't you guys go ahead and guess?
I know who it is, so I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser?
Is he like the Mad Hatter or something?
Oh, that's good.
That's a solid guess.
That is very good.
Thank you.
He's not.
Okay.
Is there
Great guess, though.
Is there a mummy villain? No. I don't know. I don't really like. I don't have a good gut answer for who I see him as. Is it somebody weird or is it like an obvious choice?
I don't think it's obvious at all.
Okay.
Oh man, it must be like a C-list Batman villain then.
That's
There
probably
is-
fair to say.
There is someone I think he would do very well as, but it's not this character.
Mothman
Oh,
No.
damn.
or Killer Moth. That's his name. Excuse me.
That's a great pull.
No.
Kite
I
Man.
don't Kite Man.
Ooh, that
Man
would be
Bat?
great.
I don't know.
No, it's Firefly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
I have definitely heard of that character before.
He was
that-
on the
on that
animated
same-
series.
On that same line of thinking, I was thinking he'd do a great Clayface.
Oh,
yeah, okay.
Oh,
Sure.
Fuck yeah, he would be a
Right?
good Clayface.
Damn, that's
Damn.
a great villain. I can't believe he hasn't been in a movie yet.
Make him sympathetic, make him a good guy then.
Firefly and Clayface have very similar, I guess, industry backgrounds.
Firefly
Face-
feels underwhelming though. As
For
like a
this
villain,
particular movie or in general?
or like as a major villain, as like to be the baddie.
Firefly?
Yeah.
What was
Well,
Batgirl?
This is an HBO Max movie
Yeah.
starring Batgirl, you know.
Mm.
I think that it's pretty clear, and I've been saying this since the movie was announced. It's pretty clear to me that this is a secondary thing in the mind of you
Yeah.
know
Warner
Warner,
Brothers.
DC, whatever. In fact, this week they were Ann Sarnoff. She's the CEO of Warner Brothers, and she was saying how they're doing away with the day and date HBO Max thing in 2022. They're
Sad.
sticking to their promise of it being 1 year. And they said, she said that it should surprise no one that the movies that are going to be released in theaters are the ones that they have confidence in. Why you would say something like that as the CEO of a company, I really don't know. But what that told me is, any movie that's not coming out in theaters is a movie you don't believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not to disagree with that, I guess to play devil's advocate in terms of like hoping for there being it still being quality is, I guess there's always the hope, right, that like the projects that have less attention and less, hands in the pot sometimes get a little bit more freedom and can sometimes rise above those limitations. So I don't know. Hopefully it's still good, but that doesn't feel great.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
there's a difference between like movies that the studio is banking a lot of financial interest in. Like Dune just came out. That's a movie that Warner Brothers is going to want to do well financially, right? There's other movies like that where studios put a lot of their pot, like they're gambling, they're all in on. But there's going to be other movies that could be really good, but they just don't think has the public's interest, that they're just going to put on HBO Max. But those movies could be excellent as well. It's just not a lot of attention on it.
they can. I was referring just to, the fact that I feel like everything about the announcements of surrounding this movie shows a lack of confidence.
Sure.
That's crazy.
That sucks. As a fan of the character, it sucks that, that's how they feel about it. And then also, we can't ignore the reality of budgets. If a movie is coming out on HBO Max, then it's going to have a lower budget than a movie that's coming out in theaters because there's different expectations. Sure. So, that's not great. And I hope for the best. Leslie Grace is playing Batgirl. The theme of this episode is certainly diversity. And I think it's funny that, they're making this play by having a Batgirl movie and then also making the person playing the character a Spanish woman. That all of that is happening where the CEO and chairman has said they don't care as much about.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that sucks. I will say though, I guess the lower budget thing is like not inherently problematic. Like it really depends.
It's not, but then like you look at like the first season of what is it called? Doom Patrol. And like some of that wasn't super tight. The props looked okay. And like to Sean's point, if they don't have confidence in it, why spend the money to like why put the money forward there? And that's probably going to be like a lower quality product from that standpoint. I think the writing and the acting, that's a different story because they have some pretty good people. But if you want to make like a visual Batgirl movie, I don't think that's going to be the priority.
Well, yeah, and to play devil's advocate to that, though, right? And like, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you're saying, but I think just for the sake of furthering the conversation, right? Like, Doom Patrol was a season of television. That's like, each episode's how long?
Hour,
right? So it's it's like 40, 45 minutes of actual stuff. So that's, 10 episodes in that season. You have to stretch that budget a lot farther than you do for a 2-hour movie.
That's fair, yeah.
And like, not to say that, like, there's not going to be a quality differential. Like, obviously more money means more, you have more ability to do crazy stuff. But like, we've seen superhero movies that were made on a tighter budget, like do well and still be visually engaging. Like, some of the experimentations with like R-rated stuff and, like sometimes a limited budget like doesn't always lead to inferior quality as much as it is just like it forces you to be more creative, in certain ways.
It depends on the savvy filmmaking and stuff. Like a good director can get a lot out of a smaller budget, but again, depends on the vision of a director.
Yeah.
I can't really understate this enough. It really is exciting to see Brendan Fraser back because he's been missing for a long time, and a few years ago he alleged sexual assault from like a president of the Hollywood Foreign Film Association or whatever.
Yeah.
And like after that he got divorced and his mom died and he was like in a severe depression. Jesus. Yeah. And like he just disappeared from Hollywood for like a decade plus. Yeah. So it really is exciting to see him back. He's been through a lot of shit and he's a fun actor.
Yeah. I think the one other thing here is the fact that Brendan Fraser is attached to this gives me hope because of how he's been doing on Doom Patrol and like that sort of connection. And they've seen their budget increase per season. So ideally, his weight coming into it, maybe they'll be able to put a bit more care into that because he's attached, and they want to kind of, not keep him happy, but they want to keep some of the quality that they've brought along with Brendan to this.
J.K. Simmons is coming back as well as Commissioner Gordon, which is that's cool. He's great. I don't know. There's a chance this will come together. I think. We'll have to see though. I hadn't.
Was good.
I was gonna say I hadn't heard of the directing team before. It's Adil Al-Arabi and then Bilal Falah. They're like a team, and they've worked on. They did Bad Boys for Life in 2020. They're working on the Miss Marvel show. They're like they're EPs on that, and they directed 2 episodes of that. So I don't know. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah, none of that gives me confidence. In fact, all of that is everything together is what gives me a lack of confidence. Because I don't know about you guys, but I saw Bad Boys, and I love the Bad Boys, but boy, was that not their best outing.
Yeah, I heard that's a terrible movie.
Mm-hmm. So as soon as I saw the director announcement, which was like earlier in the year, I was like, "Yep, this movie's dead." But I guess I'm a little bit of a harsher critic.
We'll see.
Let's talk about Razorblades. It's one of my favorite.
Keep them under your tongue.
Yeah,
stick them in an apple.
Candy.
Or in candy, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, anybody who takes an apple on Halloween, you deserve to get it.
That's on you.
Why would you take fruit? If somebody gives you fruit, you throw that shit back at them.
Or you could put them in your comics, which is what Image is doing this year. They're going to be putting out James Tinian's Razorblades, which is the horror. Well, it's coming out next year, but it's the horror magazine that James Tinian has been putting out. It's 70 to 80 pages each issue, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
cool. Shit.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's really cool. And this was something that we talked about when it was first announced, but of course it was a digital initiative, and I didn't have access to it, and I don't even know where to get it. So it just wasn't something that we checked out. At least I know I didn't. I think Kale, you had read it, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. They're great. Razorblades is a tremendous horror anthology magazine. I haven't read one in a while. I think the last one came out in July. I don't know. But it's great. Yeah, I'm thrilled for this to get a physical copy on my shelf.
Are you pulling our leg again?
Not about this. I would never. I do have one for you, though.
No.
There
was already one trick this episode on your part. So unless you have a treat for us, I'm not interested.
So Sean said Image is putting out James Tinian's Razorblades. And I went, well, yeah, the dude's got that great big beard. He's not using them.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
Okay.
So James Tinian said, I am also extremely excited. By the way, out of quotes, this is from his Substack. So apparently now the place you go to get announcements from these creators is Substack. As if you need to be subscribed to read about this. I'm on Bleeding Cool, and they're doing an article. I'm sure everyone's doing it. But yeah, so James says, I am also extremely excited to announce that the whole first volume of Razorblades, the horror magazine, is going to be collected in a deluxe hardcover edition that will be released by Image Comics in April of next year. The press release announcing that should be going out more or less at the same time as this post. We are extraordinarily proud of what we've been able to build in the self-published space over the last year and a half, and we're very excited to have a testament to all of the work by all of these stunning creators to live on the shelves for posterity. Featuring the amazing cover to Razorblades, the horror magazine, number 3 by David Romero. If you missed out on Razorblades, the horror magazine over the last year and don't want to wait until April to catch up, all 5 issues are available now in digital form. Pay what you want. every issue is 70 to 80 pages of original horror, illustrations, prose, and nonfiction. We're proud of it all. That's great. The cover to issue 5 is absolutely horrifying and disgusting.
It's so good.
Yeah,
it's so fucking gnarly. When if you heard me when we first started this, I was like, oh, like that was what I was looking at.
Yeah, that's really nasty.
Some Junji Ito shit.
I was gonna say Geff definitely has heavy Ito vibes.
I wanna quickly show the listeners,
sure,
who are watching on YouTube anyway, what nastiness we're talking about. So
brace yourself.
If you're on YouTube, you can see this disgusting image of a family who sat down to have a meal in their living room, or I don't know where they're at. I mean, there's a crib. They're eating next to the crib. I don't get that. But they have disgusting multicolored tentacles coming out of every visible orifice in their body.
Looks like silly string.
And they're crying too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you had silly
I'd be
string coming
crying.
out of your eyes.
No, I know. It's just
throat.
It's more unsettling. It's bad. It's even the cats too. Like
That's
everything.
that's what I was gonna say. The most horrifying one is definitely the cats.
I think this is wholesome. Look at them. They're a family. They're eating together. This is true Addams Family values.
Sure.
All right. Well, that's disgusting, but I'm actually really excited for this. I'm excited for Razorblades. I was excited for it before. Now that it's coming out in physical, I'm definitely going to read it. I kind of wish it was out now, though. Like
for Halloween. Yeah.
What's the date on it?
It's coming out in April 2022.
Oh, geez, I'm never gonna remember that.
Be April 20 in bookstores on May 3rd. This is actually something that I'm going to pick up physically. I want to see this shit like in that bigger format. If it's a magazine size, that'll be nice.
Yeah, this is cool. I think that like this as a thing, like I think speaks to and not that this was like a part of his Substack, but like just this kind of as a strategy, right? Of like, we're going to do the digital first thing. We're going to find ways for the folks that want to do digital and be up to date and be right there the second it comes out, can keep up with it. And then we go through the more traditional channels when things are collected, when it's a little bit easier to get them out. And, you know, it seems like a really smart way to do releases. Because you can release a book like this and have it have buzz and have Kale's like, oh yeah, I've read it. You should get this, right? Like, and I don't know, like it seems like a smart move to kind of be able to find ways to deliver your work to as wide an audience as possible wherever they want to meet you, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be great, and it has interviews with creators like Scott Snyder and others. There's pros. It seems like it's a real to do. So you're probably going to get your money's worth.
Real bang for your buck. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Kind of reminds me of like, Wave Blue World does that, right? Where they really try to like Ahoy. Yeah. Sorry. Really like to try to include like those extra bits of prose, and there's like games and there's, you know, like all these things that make it, you know, feel like more of an event, I guess, when you pull it.
Like a value, like more of a value for your comic.
Almost more like a traditional magazine, you know, which is cool. It's different, you know?
Well, Legendary is trying to get a whole lot of bang for their buck, as they have launched a Kickstarter for their film Dune. So I'm not sure if you guys know this or how many people know this. We've talked about it here before, but Legendary Pictures has a comic book arm. And that comic book arm, Legendary Comics, has a Kickstarter going right now for a graphic novel adaptation of Dune, the movie.
Okay.
Damn, Bleeding Cool needs to fix this link. Sorry. There's a period in it, so the link goes to a dead 404 page.
Really?
Yeah. It's still up, but like I went through the Bleeding Cool links to get on the page, and they need to fix that URL.
So currently it has 812 backers who have pledged $86,828. Wow, that's a lot of money. out of a $10,000 goal.
That's
I don't know,
insane.
Wow.
I don't know why I thought, $812. Jeez.
If I'm not mistaken, I think his son, Frank Herbert, who originally wrote Dune, I believe his son is working on the graphic novelization. It's being kickstarted by Legendary. I haven't heard much about the quality or anything about this book. I've seen it on bookshelves and stuff, though. Like I've seen it being sold.
Well, those are like ancillary stories.
Oh, okay.
This is like of the actual movie. Those are like different, like House of Atreides stories and stuff.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Someone in the Discord actually mentioned, like, asked if anybody had been reading it. It looks pretty interesting. I might go back and pick some up.
I finally saw the movie yesterday and it kicked ass. It was terrific.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Glad you liked it. So a lot of people are really angry about this.
Oh,
As you guys will recall, Keanu Reeves, when they did the Berserker Kickstarter, that caused a lot of creators to be in an uproar about the fact that, this major comic book company was using Kickstarter, which is for, according to them, for independent creators to get their books out, that they were sucking all the air out of the room. Of course, we know that did not happen, but that was the claim. So that same claim is being made now, except I have even seen some people going as far as to place culpability on Kickstarter itself for allowing this.
How?
Who gives a shit?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Like, I made a similar point during the Berserker conversation, but I just think that's insane. Like, in what universe is it Kickstarter's responsibility to be like, sorry, you're not allowed to use our platform because you're too big? Like, that's never been the elevator pitch for Kickstarter, right? It's never been, you, the indie creator, can use this to get you put a project out there, and if people want to back it, they back it. That's the platform. Like, that's insane. That's insane that you would argue, like, yeah, what do you think, they hate money? Like, they're going to make thousands of dollars off of this. Like, I'm sorry. That's what Kickstarter wants, is to have successful Kickstarters. They don't care who they're from.
Realistically, too, if they did kind of start borrowing bigger names or bigger publishers or what have you, it would really affect their service. I think it would draw less eyes to Kickstarter,
right,
if these bigger IPs, names, whatever, weren't using that service anymore. I think that's a naturally something for someone to be gravitated to.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like, you're not going, like, presumably you're not, if you're a more casual reader, if you just saw the movie and you're like, oh, cool, they have this comic thing, like, you're already not somebody who's initially going to look for an indie creator. But once you're on the platform, they have recommendations, they have things to start to point you into different directions so that you can continue to support other creators in the platform. And if this is big enough, then bring people in. What's the issue with bringing people in to spend their money on this? And ideally, some subset of that is going to spill out into other creators.
I think
Let's say,
go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's say that none of that happens, right? Let's say there's no spillover and it's just the only people who interact with this Kickstarter are people who specifically care about Dune and nothing else. That still doesn't impact comic creators. Because if the people are here for Dune, they were never here for you in the first place.
Right.
What you hope is that people say, like Marco said, go and support something else because they start browsing the site or what have you. But most people, I would argue, who are on this are here because they like the movie or they like the book, Dune, and they want to get more. And I think there's a fundamental lack of understanding about what Kickstarter is. So from the perspective of somebody who is an indie comic creator or an indie musician or anything like that, Kickstarter is your lifeline. For you, Kickstarter is the only way that you can produce this book or this movie or this, whatever it is. And you need people to support you because otherwise it's not going to happen. But the other aspect of Kickstarter is that it allows you to get more for your money. If you are a fan of Dune and you want this graphic novel, you could easily wait until it's in stores and you'll get it. But if you do the Kickstarter, what that means is that they're going to be able to give you more add-ons and things like that once the project is inevitably successful. All the stretch goals will be unlocked, and you will be a benefactor of that in a way that you won't be if you buy it from the store. And so this is what Legendary Comics said in their basically they had to respond to the criticism because people were not clear on how they could make the movie but not afford to make the comic book. So this is what Legendary said. The graphic novel is certainly being released into retail, but campaigns like these are the only way we can give back extras to the fans, like the free stretch goals or many of the other items that will be made in very limited supply and are exclusive to this campaign, or be able to offer this many variant covers. We hope you find some stuff you like. Most of the items in this campaign are exclusive to the Kickstarter and take time to produce. Without knowing final order numbers, which we won't have until the surveys are complete, it's not possible to go into production. Following what in most cases is a 30-day production schedule, we're allowing another 60 days to get everything to the warehouses given the current supply chain crisis, and then additional time to get the packages out to you, given the delays in shipping that have been happening. It's possible we'll be ahead of schedule, but we want to properly set expectations for how long it takes to create the premium products we're offering here and get them to you. What's the problem with that?
There isn't one. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like, and I think that this extends out beyond comics. Like, you've seen this kind of criticism of other Kickstarter projects from people who are, already looked at as successful or whatever. And I don't know. Like, I feel like it comes back to, for me anyway, right? It's, you speak with your wallet. Like, do you want this book? No? Then don't back the Kickstarter. It's literally that simple. Like, I think Marco made the point earlier. And I know you did as well, Sean. I don't think that it makes sense for you to compare this to regular Kickstarter comics. Like, the person that goes and backs a special edition of a movie adaptation into a comic book is not the same person that's browsing comics projects on Kickstarter to be like, I want to find the next indie book I'm going to support. Like, they're not the same person. Like, I would bet you a lot of people who back this will buy this, put it on a shelf, and never actually read it.
Sure.
Because it's a collector's item.
And I think one of the piece there is for those people that actually do read it, and maybe they aren't comics readers. I think the one thing that it does do is also just introduce new people to the medium.
Yep.
And at the bare minimum, that's something that does affect creators outside of this, and affects creators that just work in the industry, because you get people who are like, oh, this is a comic, I get it, maybe I want more.
Yeah.
And like, not for nothing too, right? Like, everybody who works on this book gets a paycheck, and
that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. And like, Legendary as a publisher makes a bunch of money. Guess what? They're going to do this again and make more books and give more people jobs. Like, it's like, comics are an industry, man. Like, it is what it is.
You're not thinking about the Fremen, though, Pete. They are an oppressed people on Arrakis, and clearly Legendary is making them mine the spice on Arrakis to make these books, and they're not getting any of the proceeds. So you're no better than a Harkonnen, frankly.
I mean, you know what, man? Like, labor laws are for Earth. I don't know.
Kale, you haven't spoken. I'm sure you disagree with the general feelings here.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm of two minds. I guess I don't necessarily agree that Kickstarter should be used by big companies, but like, if they're gonna, and Kickstarter's gonna let them know, what the fuck? I don't
give a shit. You think Kickstarter shouldn't let them?
I mean, it's Kickstarter. If they want, it's like Pete said, if they're going after the money, then okay, whatever. Right. I don't give a shit.
Okay,
I'm old and tired. I don't give a shit about Dune. I don't give a shit about Keanu Reeves.
I can't.
What do you want?
tell you how good of a podcaster you are.
There are 5 of us. Why do you want my opinion?
Because it's different.
Well, that was my opinion.
Jesus Christ.
Keeps pulling our legs.
Leave us a comment if you back this Kickstarter.
Let's talk about Eternals. Eternals is dropping next Friday, and it's already got the distinction. Unfortunately, it is a negative one of being the worst rated Marvel Studios movie on Rotten Tomatoes ever.
Really?
Ever.
Here we
Now
go.
Now you want to talk about something I care about. Let's go.
Phase 4, baby.
grind Marvel into the dirt. Let's see it.
I don't
Fuck
think
yeah.
you're gonna like where this is going.
So it currently has a 60% tomato meter score, making it rotten. It has a worse score than Thor: The Dark World.
Wow.
Guys,
so
that's
bad.
too high.
Oh, have you seen it?
No,
Oh, okay.
But knowing critics, it's too high.
it's too high.
I think it's 9 points too low, frankly.
Well done.
That is out of 120 reviews, and no fans have been able to review it yet because it's not out. So that is where we stand. It'll fluctuate, I'm sure. I have a feeling that the audience score will be higher, because I do think that there are a lot of people who are invested in liking this movie, because of the representation aspects of it.
Oh, okay. The fuck?
I saw a thing on Twitter the other day on maybe it was like Metacritic or something where people are like review bombing this though because of the representation aspect.
It's impossible.
Well,
At least on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, right. But that might be something that affects the tomato score because folks get riled up about stuff like that.
The audience score.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. It can just as easily go the other way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't explain like the critic score. Like, are they mad because too many brown folk? Like, I don't.
No, I think they think the movie's bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, that can be a thing, right? Like, you can be a racist, reviewer, but like, you wouldn't, I don't know. I have a hard time thinking that this is like just that, right?
Yeah.
So we can also just read the reviews, right? Like, I have read obviously not every review, but I've read a couple, and there's consistency. Like, there are clear problems with this movie that I don't feel like, legitimate websites are going to publish someone's racist rant.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, so I saw Dune yesterday, and in the trailers before the movie, the Eternals trailer came on. It's the first time I've seen it on a big screen. I've seen it on like my phone or whatever, and I just felt nothing for it. I really feel nothing for this movie. It doesn't even totally feel like a Marvel movie. It feels almost like a those movies are adapted from like novels that are intended for like teenagers or whatever. I can't think of any off the top of my head, like Etrigan or something. Like, it kind of had that vibe to it.
You mean Aragon? Etrigan is the rhyming demon.
And maybe that's just a feeling. I'm speaking on intuition here, but there's other things too. I remember seeing some of the quotes of Chloe Zhao talking about it, and she says things like she's inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey and other Stanley Kubrick movies, and like talks about channeling that in her cinematography. And like, something about people saying that always comes off as a red flag, where it's like, ooh, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that means I'm gonna hate this movie.
I love Stanley Kubrick movies. Don't get me wrong. 2001: A Space Odyssey is a classic. Whenever people talk about their filmmaking being inspired by things like that, it always feels like you think very highly of this movie in a pretentious way, but somehow there's a huge disconnect to me.
Yeah, the one word I've seen a lot is dull. And I expressed concern all throughout the ramp up and the build up to this movie, and I really got around to like being excited about it when we did the book club, because I was like, oh man, if there are elements from this comic in the movie, then that's great. It seems like they tried to do something really different, and I wonder how audiences are going to take to that, because clearly critics, as of right now, they feel like it's not good. Like it's just not a good movie. I don't think critics are likely to bash the movie for what it's not, in the sense that it's not more like a Marvel movie. I don't feel like critics are generally great to Marvel movies anyway. So if it's not that, then I'm really, really interested in what it is that's so, bad about the movie.
It's interesting. Marvel movies have there is a contrarian aspect of the way people talk about Marvel movies, for sure. But like when you go on Rotten Tomatoes and you look at the tomato meter from critics, most Marvel movies are between like 70 and 100%. Like most Marvel movies are, fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
I could see a world where if this movie does deviate from the house style, as Pete likes to call it, that does confuse and frustrate critics.
It's interesting because I'm like going through the like pull quotes for all the reviews, and like I don't know, it's interesting. Like people definitely feel like split, because there's definitely things like here, like this one comes from the ABC News critic, Peter Travers. He said, a Marvel epic that values personal connections over spectacle. Sorry, adrenaline junkies, but that's what Oscar-winning indie director Chloe Zhao brings to her first blockbuster. The result is uneven but memorably inclusive and unique. And then it's like similar vein here, right? It's like takes a special. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Takes a special kind of movie anti-magic to make an entire audience indifferent to the potential destruction of the planet. So it's like it sounds like it is juggling some of those like trope big things, like, oh, the planet's going to get destroyed, but it also feels like it's trying to eschew those things. And I wonder if it ends up feeling middling because it's not enough in either direction. It's not conventional enough to appeal to the people that want the conventional formula, and it's not far enough away from the formula to like be a meaningful change. I wonder.
I'll tell you what frustrates me about the positive review that you just read from the pull quote, and you see it in almost all of the positive reviews. I don't want inclusivity to be a point in its favor. If the movie's good, it's good. And inclusivity can be the cherry on top of that. Like it's great and it's diverse, or it's great,
Sure.
I don't want movies that are just pandering, and this gives me that vibe, and I've had that vibe, to be honest, since they've announced the cast. And here's a quote, since we're pulling Pop Matters: representation should be the headline grabber for Eternals, but instead the conversation around the film will likely focus on how much of a disappointment it is. Got to make a good movie first. Yeah,
and sure, like fair enough. I think to pull another one that doesn't touch on that, right? This one's from NPR. Film pushes back against the usual complaints offered up by those who harbor a performative disdain for Marvel's cinematic output. So like there are people who are saying like, oh, like people won't like this, or like it checks all those boxes that people are saying like Marvel movies don't, But I don't know. Doesn't seem like a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, the thing with the people who really don't like Marvel movies, I don't think there's anything that Marvel or Disney can do to make people like Marvel movies, even if they make them like objectively better movies from a thematic and plot and structure standpoint. I just don't think there's any way of winning the audience that you don't already have.
But I don't think that this is that. I don't think these reviewers are coming out with that mentality necessarily. I think it is to Sean's point of like, if the movie's good, then it doesn't necessarily matter. Like you could be the biggest anti-Marvel fan, but you go, you know what? It's a good movie. I don't like Marvel, but like,
I think that's the thing though. I think Phil's point is that there are a lot of reviewers that don't think that way. Like I I've interacted with people that have that attitude about Marvel movies, right? Where it's just like they inherently write them off because of what they are, and are not willing to engage with them as an actual movie because they go into it with like an already a cynical attitude, right? Of like, and then anything that affirms that bias is what they will then point to as, oh, this is the reasons why this is bad versus I don't like it, or I'm over it, which is fine. You don't have to like it or you could be sick of it. That's a totally legitimate opinion. But I think that the argument that Phil's making that there are a lot of people who kind of like, I think, review media in bad faith. I definitely believe that. And I think that it's particularly prevalent in movies. I think there are a lot of film reviews that are written by people who are like capital MP movie people and resent where Hollywood is right now in terms of its focus on these big blockbuster movies that,
okay,
don't
but
speak
is
to them.
that?
I don't know. I haven't seen the movie.
Do you think that this is where that is where the reviewers are coming from?
I mean, I have a hard time thinking that it's just that because 60 is low. That's like a low score. So I don't know, because some things like that are gonna like your bullshit detectors are gonna go off at different levels for different folks, right? So like, I don't know. There might be a large segment of the audience that, like you said, Sean, right? I would imagine the audience score will be higher than this. But how much higher? I don't know. Like,
maybe not. I mean, if this movie's trying to be something that Marvel doesn't usually make, that I feel like there's no audience for that. It's trying to it's trying to dip its fingers in two different pies. And I mean, maybe
look at WandaVision though.
Well, what about WandaVision?
It was different, and people responded to that.
Yeah, but it wasn't trying to be like this. You call it like a capital M movie type thing. It wasn't trying to be that. If this movie's trying to be that, it's those are totally two separate circles in a Venn diagram. I feel like there is no overlap.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I think too, like of the reviews you guys read, mostly the reviews were fairly even keeled on complimentary and negative. They both had positive and negative elements of, so I mean, to answer Sean's question toward Pete, like, I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure you'll find that, but it just sounds like a shitty movie.
Yeah. The folks that didn't like it don't feel like they're coming at it with vitriol. It's more like, oh yeah, this doesn't come together. Like it's less than the sum of its parts.
And that brings me back to my original point, which is most Marvel movies are critically well received.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they are. And the fact that this one isn't, and a lot of the commentary is around it being, there's an air of pretense in it. I think, like I said, that's a disconnect. And I think that's going to confuse audiences.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what audiences are going to think. I'm interested in what we're going to think, and that's why we're going to do a review of this film. So you'll be able to hear our thoughts about it next week. It's a bummer.
Is this the MCU's last Jedi moment? Is this they're going to like pull the plane up? The Eternals don't exist. We were kidding.
One of the reviewers said that they felt when the lights went up, they felt this was the MCU's jump the shark moment.
Oh,
that is
wow.
That's
very
incredible, harsh statement, and I don't. It's almost impossible that that's actually true. But if it made this person feel that way, that's not a great sign.
There was
sorry, just to before we move on to that, past that quote. Can you say who that was, or just what organization? Because if that was somebody like an NPR or something, I'm gonna.
Well, Sean looks that up. I remember there was a Twitter thread a couple weeks ago of people kind of taking pictures of people's tweets that are Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, seeing Jack Kirby's art of Celestials. And being like, what the fuck is this? This is so cartoony and dumb. And we know that they're in this movie. We've seen them in the trailer. I could see just from a concept standpoint, people thinking this is jumping the shark.
Yeah, I did see one of the negative reviews was basically saying that. It was like very like I'm a pretentious movie bro. Because they were literally you made the comment about Kubrick, and it's literally like they say, oh well, Kubrick and this other, I forget who the other director they listed was. Take the opportunity of like transhuman like experimentation, blah blah blah. Like this, steeps it in this like very comic booky like pop mythology, and it's like right. It's Marvel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what we're doing. It's not a Stanley Kubrick movie.
Yeah, it was, by the way, Kale, it was a movieguy.com. So, who knows what that is.
Yeah.
Indie reviewer, I guess.
Yeah. So the jury is not yet out on Eternals. Obviously, these reviewers don't make up they don't, the conversation about this film doesn't begin and end with them.
Right. Because it begins and ends with us. And
exactly.
that's why the jury's still out.
Exactly. Thank you, Marco. So yeah, our conversation about Eternals will continue next week, but I do want to talk about Iron Fist. Well, actually, I don't want to talk about Iron Fist, but we have to.
But here we are.
Yeah, because
Finn Jones.
No.
Okay, then I don't want to talk about Iron Fist.
I'll never again talk about Finn Jones. I actually forgot his name, and I was glad I did. So thanks a lot, Phil.
Yep.
So Iron Fist recently gave up, Danny Rand, I should say, recently gave up the mantle of Iron Fist, decided he was Iron Fist no more. And that's they even put out a teaser which kind of apes the Spider-Man no more. Yeah,
it was good.
Iron Fist Heart of the Dragon was a miniseries that just wrapped up, and in it Danny is powerless and says, you know what, I'm just not gonna be doing this anymore. So almost immediately the teases began about what's next for Iron Fist, and we now know quite a bit. So we know that the new Iron Fist series will start in February of 2022, of course. And we've got the image. We've got the image of the actual character. Looks pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. The cover's hot. And we have the creative team. We know that Alyssa Wong, and I'm trying to find the artist. But we know the creative team. There were people who were definitely excited by this team and by the possibility of there being a new Iron Fist.
It's Michael YG.
Thank you. Yeah.
Colors J Ramos.
So I feel that there's a slight problem with this.
What? Why?
Oh boy. So there's no chance that the character under the mask is not Asian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I would think so. That's kind of like the that's like the angle that this article is taking as well, right?
Right. So what happens when it's time for Danny Rand to be Iron Fist again?
Gotta punch out a dude. Take the mantle back.
So, okay. Interesting. Walk with me here, Marco.
Okay.
So the way Iron Fist gets his powers is he has to become the best fighter in Kunlun.
Okay.
And his reward for that will be he goes into the cave and he has to fight. I can't recall the dragon's name. He has to fight a dragon. And if he beats the dragon,
Xiao Lao?
Shu Lao,
Yeah.
yes.
Sure.
He plunges his hand into the dragon's heart. And then he hugs it and he gets the dragon's tattoo on his chest. So if Danny Rand wants to come back, does he then plunge his hand into the Iron Fist heart and then hug him to get his tattoo back?
Perhaps.
I hope not.
That would be
That'd be
rough.
kind of that'd be some Kali Ma shit. Just
Yeah.
rips out the heart.
Little Mortal Kombat action.
Yeah.
He wants,
So-
if he wants to be Iron Fist again, he's got to put his hand through the heart of the new Iron Fist.
Mhm.
That'd be a cool way, like, to get the powers and stuff back. Like, people, like, if somebody wants his powers now, you just punch the heart of the current Iron Fist.
You have to beat it.
Yeah, you gotta beat him.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Gotta kill him.
That'd be kind of
right.
cool.
Okay. So if this happens, right? I kind of feel like Danny Rand is gonna be gone. Like I kind of feel like this is an angle to get Iron Fist into the movies without having to ever have to deal with the conversation about him being white.
Oh,
ever again.
interesting.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that that'll definitely happen, but I think that like you bringing that up makes a lot of sense to me. Like I could see it being, like, or this is not the first time that's happened with comic book character, right? Like Mantle's Pass. And if this is the version that, gets brought to the big screen and is good and people connect with it, yeah, I mean, there's a chance that is the path forward, right? That like, whoever this new Iron Fist is popular and Danny's old hat, right? It's not like Danny Rand in Iron Fist is the most popular Marvel character, not by a lot.
He's pretty popular.
Sure, I'm not saying that nobody
He was
cares
in the
about him,
70s too.
but I mean, he's not an A-list character in the way that all the characters that they've put forward and had starring roles in movies and stuff like that have been.
I mean,
and-
Shang-Chi, he wasn't like an A-lister before his movie came out.
That's my point.
Oh, I see. I thought you were saying the opposite point.
No. My point is that, yeah, he's not an A-lister, and the way that most characters become A-listers is to have a movie or a TV show. And to Sean's point, if the new show or the new movie is starring whoever the new Iron Fist is rather than a Danny Rand, that will be the character that people associate with Iron Fist moving forward, not Danny Rand. And he might come back in the comics, he might become a new character or take up a new mantle or whatever, but he will probably not be Iron Fist anymore then, moving forward, right? At least not in the public, perception. And whether or not, that's a good or a bad thing is kind of like immaterial, I think, to the point that Sean's making, that I think it's something that like will likely happen if that's the line they're trying to draw right now,
It's weird because the Shang-Chi movie incorporated elements of the Iron Fist mythology, if I remember correctly. And it made me feel like, well, what's the point of an Iron Fist anymore, regardless of who's under, the cowl or whatever, because I feel like we've got that covered now.
That's what I was thinking, is if they want to replace Iron Fist in the comics, and let's say it does get translated into the movies, then yeah, I had a similar thought of just like, well, what does it matter if we have a similar, in terms of these are the aesthetics that we're trying to get off from like a Asian influence action hero, well, what does it matter at that point? Danny and the Netflix TV shows are going to be material at that point, or not necessarily worth revisiting.
I mean, initially, Iron Fist had his place in kung fu books, but eventually he and Luke Cage couldn't sell, so they put them together and made Heroes for Hire, and that's where Iron Fist really made his mark. And Shang-Chi, despite being a BC tier character, sold strong because of his kung fu roots. So they did have separate worlds that they inhabited and made work.
Yeah. I haven't cared about a Danny Rand comic book, an Iron Fist comic book in a long time. Unfortunately, I had a lot of love for that character in the Bendis era, when he was a part of the New Avengers and all that good stuff. And then Carr Andrews had a really great Iron Fist run. It was a mini, but it was fantastic.
It's very good.
Yeah. And then for me, the character might as well have not existed since then. But despite that, I like Iron Fist. And I'm not sure what is exciting about Iron Fist, right? Because what is Iron Fist without Danny Rand?
Right. And
Yeah. The character himself is a commentary, good or bad, is a commentary on the white savior, mentality, similar to Doctor Strange to an extent.
Right.
That's a conversation to be had, but that story, Danny Rand's story, is a commentary on that. And when it's used and done well, it's done really well. The problem is you can only do that a couple of times, I think.
Sure.
Otherwise,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think that you have to beat people over the head. I think
sure.
The problem is that people will not accept that. The Iron Fist show, bad as it was, received criticism before we even watched it because of the fact that a white guy was playing this role, even though the character in the comics is also white.
Sure.
And we had this conversation back then about what to do about that, about whether or not that was okay. And 4 years on, I guess, I'm frustrated by the idea that this character can't exist because people just don't want to see a white guy in that role when, as Kale pointed out, the very existence of the character is actually a condemnation of exactly what they're accusing the character of being. But because people don't know that, and they've probably never engaged with Iron Fist in the comics, they're just reacting off what they see, and that really sucks.
Something that's always kind of frustrated me around that debate was like, why is it that, like, for anything that's a martial arts character, why does it have to be like an Asian person playing him? Because that to me feels really racist. Like that feels like really racially driven to be like, oh, only Asian people can do kung fu characters in movies or TV. Like, I'm all for creating more diverse roles in Hollywood. I think that is important to see more like racial diversity in media. But like, to put people in boxes where it's like, only an Asian person can play a character that knows martial arts or kung fu or has that background. I remember a specific instance in the 60s Star Trek where the producers of the show wanted to give George Takei's Sulu like a samurai sword that he could do, and he was like, I really don't want to do that because it feels really racially driven. He's like, what if the character was really good at fencing, and so Sulu was good at fencing instead?
Sure.
Which is not like an inherent Asian background. I actually don't know where fencing comes from, but
it's French.
It's that, yeah. So it's that kind of thing where it's just like, can we just not make everything like in a box and feel really racially driven?
Yeah, and I think I generally agree with that. Like, I don't inherently have any issue with the idea of like Danny Rand being a white guy who does karate, or kung fu rather. That's fine, I think, on its face. But I guess to play devil's advocate in the conversation, I feel like part of it is like, it's easy to say that, but then it's like, okay, but like, how many kung fu movies get made, right? And it's like, there's only been Shang-Chi, who's the only Asian lead in the Marvel universe.
That's not true. I mean, throughout like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were a myriad of kung fu
but
movies
now
that starred different martial artists. Yes, that's fair.
And that's the context with which this is being discussed, right? If we were living through, like there were all of these like kung fu movies, there was a golden age of kung fu movies, and there was one series about a white martial artist, I think it'd be a different conversation.
I don't. I think that people have made up their minds about what how things have to be. And, you know, you look at even in the comics, you know, we're going to talk about like our main topic, which we're basically in at this point, is about, you know, the diversity in comics. And one of the things that you see a lot, and I've spoken about this myself, is that writers are often pigeonholed into writing characters who look like them in real life. And that when that doesn't happen, it's always a topic of conversation now. Mm. So I feel like we have moved into a space where, you know, you can't necessarily tell stories or be a part of stories that aren't, you know, your lived experience. Like just the other day, I read an article about how certain actors have been called, you know, onto the carpet for playing characters who were LGBT. Like Benedict Cumberbatch was actually called out for this, and Juliana Margulies. And their response was, well, I'm an actor. This is what I do. Why wouldn't I be able to play that role? I think it's about the story. And if the story of Danny Rand being a white guy who's a martial artist is compelling, I don't know what more matters. Like, why can't that happen? It's just a really strange time that we're living in, and I think we're seeing it more and more. And so anyone who has a response to that can feel free to do so, but I want to get us into the main topic. So
sure,
I'll get us into it, and we can sort of use everything we just discussed as a lead-in.
Sure.
Okay. So I think that the comic book industry is not unique in that it has definitely undergone a lot of changes as it relates to the way it presents not just its characters, but the people behind the books as well. And wanting things to be more diverse and inclusive. I think, you know, we've seen over the years a lot of, I actually went back and listened to some of our prior discussions about this, and, you know, they were pretty good, although our audio quality was not necessarily up to par.
Marco.
Me, I had a bad mic too.
I've changed things.
Yes, you have. And one of the things that we talked about even back then was the fact that, you know, Marvel, and at the time Rebirth was coming out, so that was DC kind of like, you know, getting away from some of their more diverse decisions and rooting right back into, you know, the main characters, while Marvel had replaced, you know, Bruce Banner with Amadeus Cho and Tony Stark with Riri Williams and Wolverine with X-23 and all these different things. And it's funny because with the exception of X-23 as Wolverine, which is just a moniker that she now shares with Logan, all of those, you know, big moves that were made around that time have been undone, which I'm happy about. Go ahead, Gil.
Miles Morales?
Well, Miles Morales was he predates that wave because there was
I see.
Yeah, I mean, he came out in 2011, I think, right?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely 2011. But yeah, so but you know, now I think we have seen a different approach to diversity, because now the diversity that we're seeing is more about diversity of sexuality or sexual orientation. We've seen a lot of that. More recently, we saw DC's major announcement of John Kent and Tim Drake as both being bisexual.
And bisexual men.
Bisexual men, yes.
Which is, huge in itself.
Yep. We've seen more of an acceptance of Harley Quinn's sexuality, which we have talked on the show about how, you know, she wasn't really allowed to have her relationship with Poison Ivy and stuff like that. Now there's an animated series where you can see that.
Yeah, it went from being something that was like alluded to being very much in the text.
Yes. To a lesser degree, I guess, you know, Mystique and Destiny.
Sure. Yeah.
And since then, we've gotten our first Marvel movie to feature an Asian main character in Shang-Chi. We got since then Captain Marvel,
Black Panther.
and Black Widow, Black Panther. So a lot has happened. A lot has happened. And I think that a lot of it is good. But unfortunately, I don't think it's all good. And I think that there is something to be said, and this will be controversial, but I think there is something to be said about the commodification of diversity in comics. And I'm scared, and this is where we'll open the floor. I'm scared of, because we have criticized brands for, like, oh, it's like what's a brand? It's
like
whatever,
Unilever and Pride Month, and their colors change to whatever the fuck.
Right. Or, they put out some shitty t-shirt or something
like,
representing. Yeah.
They're like, hey, queer community, allow us to take your money.
Right.
For 1 month.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back to ignoring that you exist.
Exactly. And obviously comics are created by people who are certainly, passionate, especially when you get, say a black writer working on, Black Panther or Luke Cage or whatever, there's a genuine desire there to make that something special. But I think on the other side of something like that, it can certainly feel as though, perfect example, Justice League Queer. That, round robin tournament that DC had earlier in the year to determine what book they were going to publish or whatever. And one of the most controversial elements was the Justice League Queer inclusion to that list, and them losing in this tournament. Well, so our ability to see this come to life was based on other people voting for it,
Right.
Real weird. And that is something that I can imagine queer fans of DC won't forget. And it's something that I'm certainly not going to forget. And again, it feels as though diversity is cool when it's something that you can make money off of. So I'll leave it there, as that'll set the stage, and you guys can say whatever you feel like saying.
Yeah, I'll respond. I have a few thoughts. Because I think it is kind of a multifaceted conversation, and it's one that's like still developing, right? Which is why I think that like you see examples of good, like you said, right? Like there's examples of like clear wins where it's like this was a successful project, helmed by a marginalized group or a creator of a marginalized group who's been able to, kind of break through, right? I think Black Panther is probably the most famous example of that, right? It was conventional wisdom in Hollywood that you couldn't have a movie that starred all black actors, right? And a big budget blockbuster movie that it wouldn't do well in whatever key market demographics, what have you. And the movie made $1 billion, right? So great. And then I think you have some of these other examples that feel more crass, and they feel more like companies either looking to, capitalize on what they see as an emerging market of like young, visibly queer people, and wanting to make media that's for that demographic, or who want a pat on the back, right? Like with what we talked about, where it's like, look at us, we're on the right side of history, and like, what are they actually materially doing aside from selling a different version of their product with like a rainbow on it, right? Like that's not really helping anybody. But where I think I'll push back on some of this stuff that you said there is like, I think that it gets tough because like in the example of Black Panther, right? Like that movie didn't get made for no reason, right? Like it didn't just happen. We as a culture didn't come to a point where that was acceptable. You had, someone like a Kevin Feige, right, who was in a position of power and was able to leverage that, similar to like what we talked about with Bendis, right, where like Miles Morales exists because Brian Michael Bendis was a famous comic book creator. So while, you know, I hear what you're saying, Sean, like I think like you get in this sticky situation where like when you have gatekeepers to places like Hollywood or like to writing at like the big two at a Marvel or a DC, and the vast majority of those people are like white dudes, I feel like you have an uphill battle as someone who doesn't exist in that, you know, Venn diagram of person who is like, oh, this is what a comic book creator looks like, right? Which is obviously not true, but it's that quote unquote conventional wisdom. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And like, I think a lot of times the kind of crass, you know, corporate desire to capitalize on something is a brick through the window to make something that used to be taboo or niche or counterculture have the ability to break in and be featured on the big screen and be the biggest Hollywood blockbuster of the year, and on and on and on. So I don't know that it's like a clean black and white situation, right? Of like, well, this is good and this is bad. I think you can look at the examples and break them down that way. But I think sometimes one can kind of lead to the other in a roundabout long-term way. Which is why I think it's just not cut and dry. You know, it's like, it is like a thing where I think for every good example, you're going to see probably one or two or three bad ones, you know? And I guess the conversation you need to have with yourself, right, or we as a community need to have, right, is like, are the wins worth the losses? And I think I would argue that they probably are. Because if like this era, right, of like the Disneys of the world realizing that they can make money by making art that appeals to queer people leads to there being art that appeals to queer people in the mainstream and is available to them, and you know, gives them that representation that they're looking for in the examples where it's good and authentic. That's something that didn't really exist before, right? As evidenced by, you know, the previous conversations we've had about this. So I don't know, you know, like that's not to make excuses for the bad or the crass examples, but I think it's more that like you're gonna get one with the other. I feel like that's like how waves in media work, right? Is like somebody has a good authentic idea and it hits, and then you have a lot of imitators, you know, and people who are like, allow me to rush and start panhandling for the gold because it's here, right? There's blood in the water. We want some of it. And I think you can like look at that in examples that matter a lot less, right? Like the MCU's success at doing the broad interconnected universe, and then we saw a bunch of people try to ape that and do a shitty, terrible job. That didn't mean that idea was bad. It was that you were an imitator and you weren't interested in presenting it in an authentic way. You had this crass version that was created by, you know, committee. And I think that's ultimately the difference, is whether it's quality or not, right? Is like, well, what's the impetus behind it, right? And, you know, it's not to say that, like, things made with the effort, like, things that are made for profit don't have to be artistically null. Again, go back to Black Panther, right? Like, I think you could argue that there's a lot of good artistry to that movie, even though it's a major motion picture, major commercial product that existed to sell tickets and make money. So, I don't know. It's tough.
You know, as cynical as brands trying to like kind of leech the money off marginalized groups in this country makes me, because it is, I think it's inherently cynical and depressing that happens. I think there's a small win though when people who are members of marginalized communities, I don't know, feel good about being represented in culture, I guess. Yeah, we circle back to just like actual important change or things that result in like actual movements in society. And I don't know how much, I don't know how much these characters on page or film matter in the grand scheme of things. We talk about Wonder Woman's ability to influence a little girl or something. Don't know how much that actually happens or whatever. I think that's not something that's really quantifiable. But what is quantifiable is hiring a person of color or a person of the LGBTQ plus community to write those things or draw those things, because that's actually giving people money to influence these things behind the scenes. Additionally, the other thing I think about is this is like the really cynical and negative thing, but the things that affect our lives every day, like in government, is just constantly making things worse for marginalized communities in politics and stuff. And there just hasn't, there are people of color and more LGBTQ plus people in government bodies and stuff than there were 20 years ago. That's true. In terms of policy, things haven't improved much in that regard, for whatever reason you want to ascribe to it. So with all these cynical things in mind, I think if people, I'm certainly not a person of an oppressed community at all, or a marginalized community. But I think with all that in mind, if people of color or people in the LGBTQ plus community or any other kind of marginalized or minority community kind of feel a win in like Pride Month or something, I think that's fine. As cynical as the motives of these corporations are in trying to like drain people of money, because ultimately at the end of the day, I think any win is a win,
Yeah, to that end, I think as well with stuff like Target's Pride Month display that shows up once a year. I think the communities are they see that, and I think that's also a good thing. Is that we're not letting corporations dictate what is good and isn't, to a degree.
Except when we do. And that's kind of, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that these examples within comics and in the films that are based on comic characters, what I see sometimes, not all the time, is we're going to do this diversity thing and then people buy into it because it's a brand that they're otherwise not questioning. Like you might balk at Disney doing something that is diverse for a month or whatever, but are you going to balk at Eternals and its cast if the movie sucks? How do you feel about that? I think it gets weird when you're talking about these characters that we love and attach ourselves to.
Well, the Eternals is a nice example of a nice middle ground where oftentimes the complaints of people of diversity in comics or comic book films or what have you circle around like race changing characters, right? Those are the things that really ruffle the feathers of the community, making Captain America black or making Thor a woman. These are the things that really fluster comic book fans.
I want to stop you right there, just so we're clear. When you say race change, you are talking about a mantle passing on to a person who is not the same race as the original.
Well, you know what?
It's not 30s Lois Lane becoming a black woman.
Yeah.
Well, no, you know what? It's both. Both those things fluster people. Making Johnny Storm a black person in the Josh Trank Fantastic Four movie also flustered audiences. It doesn't really matter. It's just when you take an established character, whether it's through mantle passing or changing their race or gender or what have you, that flusters the community. Well, my point here is that Eternals is an entirely new thing for audiences, and the the characters may race change or whatever, but there's such a bottom of the totem pole priority for comic book fans. I don't think most audiences or comic book fans care that they're changing like the identity of these characters, right? It's something fresh in that regard. So I think the term I think if you're going to do like a diversity moment in film for comic book films, like Eternals is a good example of one that will, I suppose, ruffle the least amount of feathers of people in the community. But if it doesn't do well, or if it's panned, are people going to blame it on the diversity rather than the quality of its film or whatever? I don't know.
What frustrates me in the Eternals example is that it feels like Marvel's response to the criticism that they received in every other phase about a lack of diversity. And I don't want that. I don't want these movies or these comics or whatever to become, hey, you guys wanted, Asian, Middle Eastern, gay, black, you wanted all this? Well, here it is. That doesn't do it for me. And it feels like that's exactly what Eternals is.
I'm reminded of, and through this conversation, I've been reminded of when we spoke to Brian Edward Hill and his story about, he was in a lecture or something, and the person asked what good representation is. And everyone's response was things like 12 Years a Slave and things that have good meaty content, Oscar contenders, et cetera. But his answer was not Die Hard. What's the other one? Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
Because it's a white man and a black man working together, and that's life. They're just there. It's not a big deal. That's just how it is. And like that is what is missing. It feels like it's not like, Marvel prides itself on being the comics that could be happening right outside your window. But people aren't getting parades for white men and black men working together. Like, this is just life. There are gay people out there. Deal with it. It doesn't need to be, well, look at this inclusion and look at that inclusion. And, oh, we missed that one. Like, just tell the story. And if you're going to be the thing outside the window, do it.
You nailed it.
What was that comic book panel like 3 or 4 years ago that everyone was ridiculing? I think it was like a Captain Marvel comic or something where a character was just like, wow, I'm so inspired by her such and such and such and such. It was like a whole monologue, and everyone like ridiculed it because it was just like, it was so exposition heavy and like focused way too hard on like the diversity or whatever. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
No,
I don't remember that, but
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah. Kale, I feel like you nailed it. I think that's the missing key for me always. It feels like people are looking for their morality points, and I just want to see cool characters doing cool things. I think when you root yourself in that, you can appeal to anybody. Mystique and Destiny is the example that I go back to because it's probably my favorite example. Them being in love and together is not a part of the story outside of the fact that they're in love. Like, who they are, them being, I don't know if they're like lesbian. I don't know what the appropriate phrasing is, but them being queer people is not the point of the story. Their love is causing the inferno, but it's not because they're gay or lesbian or anything like that. It's because of who they are, and that's the difference. Why is it that John Ridley only so far at DC has gotten to write black characters? Ta-Nehisi Coates finally got his at-bat with Captain America. It felt like Marvel didn't give a shit about that Captain America run. That's what I'm talking about. But John Kent comes out as bi, And I mean, they didn't even give the man the chance. They put it out there on Front Street. And I understand there were reasons why they felt they had to do that, but it's like, damn, it feels like you're trying to get some type of, congratulations out of this. And I don't think that that's necessarily deserved. I want to see the story.
I've been thinking about this from the brand perspective, just because I think, like, at work, this has been something that we've had to sort of broach, is how do you communicate a brand's willingness to participate in the conversation that happens on a societal level when people are asking, hey, what are your opinions on it, and how do they check against what I feel, or whatever respective person. And it makes it difficult because as a brand, you don't want to necessarily associate, because your statement to whatever degree affects sales, and that's cynical. But I think similarly, the way people think that buying a certain book or something is emblematic of supporting the ideologies versus an art, let's say, I think that that's a similar conversation, in that the brands will make a statement. The brands will, in that example, like, hey, John Kent is bi now. Like, this is a thing because we're not morality points, but like saving face on, this is our joint perspective and we're okay, and we need to make sure that people understand that we're okay with this.
They're making a moral statement.
Yeah, and I think that's what ends up happening in for stuff like Pride Month, where everybody's profile picture suddenly has all these colors on it, and it's a play on support because the communities in which they service want to see that support. But it's a double-edged sword, because then the people that see that don't want it to be a brand play. But how does a brand support the community without it inherently being tied to the brand? And that makes it difficult to be able to separate any kind of genuine reaction, because you also have to realize that the brand is made up of different people who then within it have diverse ideas and opinions. And can you separate the people within the brand from those individual people? Like, how does that all tie together? And it becomes just like super murky. And a lot of it is, like a morality play, because, hey, we're not trying to harm the community. We want to support the community, and this is a statement to say so. But if you feel like it is cynical for us to make that statement, then we can't appease that either.
I don't think it's inherently cynical to make a statement, though, right? Like, I think there's a difference between, a company that changes their, their logo to be rainbow for Pride Month, and then, I don't know, like, supports, legislation that's against, queer folks, right? Like, that's clearly transparent versus, like, I don't know, like an organization that, does so because they have, a significant number of the people in the company are queer, right? Or like right. It's actually representative of the company's values because of who makes up that company, or who that company sells to, or who that company, like sees as their consumer base, right? And being like, hey, like, just so you're aware, this is where our values are as an organization, right? And I think it's easy to look at that as being an inherently cynical or thing, but I don't think it is, because I think it comes from this like weird perspective that I feel like people have about action versus inaction, where people look at it as being a binary choice between I either take action or things stay the same, right? Like doing nothing is not an action, but doing nothing is an action, right? Like choosing not to make a statement about how you feel about something is a statement, right? And that is something that I think that like when you're talking about these multinational corporations and stuff like that, that becomes a big part of the conversation, right? Where if you are an organization that doesn't plant your flag while others do, like that says something about you, right? And
that's the part that I have issue with, because it's a catch-22 on whether or not you support or don't support, because you don't necessarily want to make that statement, because then it appears to be that, okay, we are pandering to this community, or we are trying to from a messaging standpoint say, hey, okay, now all queer folk give this bank money for this month. And
yeah, but like remove banks, like that's different. Like we're talking about like businesses that make art. Like I think that that's like not the same thing as like a consumer product or a service or something like that. If you want to have that conversation, I think that's a different conversation than this. Art,
they are peddling consumer products still, though.
Sure, yeah. Right. Like a book is a consumer product, but like you can't moralize around those the same way, right? Like the idea that like Marvel and DC are companies that, the way that they make money is by telling stories about characters who are heroes, right? And who are supposed to be these paragons of virtue in many ways. And not every character, of course, but, the marquee peeps. Like Sean said earlier, right? Like we imprint ourselves on art, right? Like we make connections to characters and to, brands, because something like Marvel has existed before we were born and it'll exist long after we're dead. And the folks that were writing when we started reading comics won't be writing when we are nearing the end of our lives and hopefully still reading comics. But Spider-Man will, right? And saying to your audience, right? Like, hey, we as Marvel, queer readers, we see you, we acknowledge you, we value you. Like that, like not doing that is making a statement and saying that, hey, like we want you to buy our books and everything, but we don't care enough about you as a community to make any kind of statement that might hurt our bottom line. That's a moral statement. And you as a consumer, if you react to that and say, well, I don't want to support a company that doesn't want to support me, that's your right as a consumer. And I think that's where it comes back on that for me.
But I feel like that's to Kale's point, is like, if it exists outside of needing to make it that spectacle, then what does it necessarily matter? Like, can it not just be this is how this is, and I don't have to, like, by me not making the statement or by some sort of inaction and just publishing a book where these things exist, does that
publishing a book where these things exist is an action? That's you planting your flag and saying, we're doing this, we're taking this risk, even though we know that this may alienate some readers. We are creating this book for you.
But I don't think that's creating the book for the community if you're just putting out a book that is what you see outside the window. If it's just that casual piece of just, hey, this is just what exists, like, I don't think that that's a statement, because you like, the statement would be, we therefore support, versus, hey, these are characters that exist and embody reality.
I want to jump in, because I would rather know that Marvel thought, that Kevin Feige thought that a Black Panther movie would be good and would have something relevant to say, and could make audiences fall in love with a character that they don't know. I would rather that be the reason that movie gets made than it gets made because they need to make a movie with a Black lead or a Black cast.
But so who said they need to, though?
So if it's about that market, if you believe that there's an untapped market of X group that wants to see this, and so you make it because those people will go out and watch it, that's what I'm talking about. If they need to do that because they're like, yeah, we can make a lot of money off of this because Black people, I don't want that.
But I mean, like, I guess my argument is like, does that matter if the art's good? Like
To me, it does. Of course, the
where,
intent matters.
That's where the cynicism comes in, right?
But the intent of who, though? The intent of like the person who signs the check or the artist, right? Because like that wasn't the people who worked on Black Panther's intent. That might have been the fucking dudes 2-3 levels above them that signed the check are like, yeah, great, cool, we can make money on this. Yeah, but like, who the fuck cares about them? They're not artists. They're not creators. They're businessmen. That's all they do is try to make money.
But that assumes that they don't play a role, and we know for a fact that's not the case. Right?
No.
So in the case of what I'm talking about with Marvel, by the way, that's not why Black Panther got made. I was just using that as an example.
Sure.
Black Panther is a perfect example of what's good. But in the case of Marvel, we know that even though we had, Black Widow up front, even though we had Nick Fury, even though we had War Machine, the people who were making the decisions, the guys you're talking about, wanted to keep those characters down.
Yeah,
like
that's the reason we didn't get a Black Panther sooner. That's the reason we didn't get a Black Widow or a Captain Marvel sooner. So
Black Widow toys.
There is intersectionality between the artist who has a genuine desire to show us something that's different and the people behind them who are paying them to do what they want them to do. And that's the point of this conversation.
It's the difference of, being chained in a basement and being starved to death, and after 2 weeks, somebody brings you food and you're like, oh, thank God. Thank you for bringing me food. When you really could just not be chained in a basement and they could feed you.
Yeah, and like I don't disagree with what either of you are saying there, but I think like to take it back to the examples we keep pulling to, right? Like that's not the world we live in. Like,
but it could be.
Sure, but I think I would argue that like it's the pieces of art that break through that start that, right? Because now the conventional wisdom isn't that a movie like Black Panther can't make money. Right now, the conventional wisdom is, oh, that movie could make $1 billion.
But why? What caused that change?
The success of Black Panther and the quality of it.
No, the decision, the authentic, genuine decision on the part of people who had the desire to make it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the jump. So why is Black Panther such a major success, but we couldn't get a Black Widow movie prior to now? Why is it that the same company, DC Comics, who is telling us that they support LGBTQ people, and one of the ways that they do that is by giving us John Kent as a bisexual man, not 2 years ago was being raked over the coals for removing the Harley Quinn Poison Ivy relationship from the comics? Which version of DC is it that we're dealing with at any given moment? Is it the one that removed the representation or the one that now has added that to John Kent's status?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, with a company like that, you have to just base it on what they're doing now because 2 years ago, different people were in charge,
You can't really ascribe moral values to a company at any given time.
Exactly.
Because that's not what they are.
Right.
Capitalism doesn't give a shit about morality. It inherently just prioritizes profit.
Yeah.
And what you just said is exactly what I was hoping that we would get at. Because, by the way, DC, the version of DC that exists now, is the same version of DC that did the Justice League queer shit this very same year.
Yeah.
So which version of DC are we talking about? That is why my key takeaway from all these years, and I have learned it almost specifically from comics and from these movies that are related to them, is that as fans, we have to stop and be very careful when we are attaching ourselves to art that is created with studios or companies that back them that have possibly very different beliefs than you do about the same things they're talking about. Ike Perlmutter was the person running Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios. The guy was a Trump supporting racist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At the same time that they're doing all this diversity play. Well, where's his money going to? So once you get into that minutia, that's why we have to be careful. We cannot put ourselves into these brands. And that would be my takeaway message. Stop looking for DC or Marvel to do what you want them to do, because they are a company that are run by people you don't know. Don't come at Tom Taylor for diversity if you don't like it, or if you like it but you don't like what he did with that girl, because the chances that those decisions are exclusively his are zero.
When we go back to the beginning of this conversation, I talked about the rot basically that exists in like every social or every like organizational sphere in this country. Like our government, all the big corporations, they may dangle something that looks like a carrot in front of you, and it may taste like a carrot, but the thing that's holding that carrot is entirely disgusting and purely motivated by greed and money, and does not actually care about the well-being, frankly, anybody, but especially people that are already marginalized and being neglected, because all these giant like industries see when a person of color or you know an LGBTQ plus person is walking down the street, there's a dollar sign.
Well, any person.
Money. Yeah. No, I know.
And literally, like any person.
Right. But I think, and I definitely agree with you, right? Like that's the reason these companies exist, is to make money. But I think I come back to the something that you said earlier, Phil, right? Where it's like, you take wins where you can get them, because we live in a cynical world. We live in a world that's like we are deep in the throes of late stage capitalism, right? Like, you know, I think, as much as it's true, right, everything you just said about Ike Perlmutter, that doesn't mean that that the art that was made by Marvel during that time is all ingenuine either, right? That the folks that, and I'm not that you're making that point, and I think it's just that, like, when you have art that it has to be made, or not necessarily has to be made, but is being made in a society where the entire point of it to exist is to perpetuate a money-making machine. Yeah, some of this cynical stuff is just par for the course, right? Like it's a like a market reality, you know, as it were.
We live in a society.
And that's why I choose to divorce myself from caring about the morality of companies and corporations. Sure. Unless they're doing shit that's overtly evil in front of our face, I don't care. Because the fact of the matter is that while people are celebrating Marvel's diversity, the head of Marvel is donating money to the party that wants you to not exist. And that's bad. Yep. So I'm not going to celebrate Sam Wilson being Captain America while the guy at the head of the table is doing things that will make me, real life me, not comic book me, die or have less quality of life.
Yeah, I mean, when we boil it down to its most simple elements, if people of color or you know people in the queer community are happy by, say, like John Kent being bi, that's a win. You know, I'm glad you have that representation. Like that, it's not that specific thing isn't for me, but inherently, if something is not for me and it makes you happy, that's fine. You know, but the thing that's also frustrating is the vitriolic conversation around things like this, because when there is, you know, quote unquote forced diversity, the vitriol that is produced by like the far right type people, because they are inherently just very racist or bigoted or problematic or whatever, makes it so that there cannot be any kind of nuanced conversation around this, because those folks on the far right are fleeing their shit so bad that there can't be a meaningful conversation, because it's all the well has already been poisoned.
I think that probably goes both ways, in the sense that, you know, in the Iron Fist example, where you cannot have, you know, a white martial artist, because that's going to cause a lot of people to be upset with that. You know, it is nuanced and it is complicated, and that's what we try to do when we have these conversations. I think there are a lot of people who do see it as black and white. And it isn't. It's really not. If you have a long memory or you care to dig in beyond the headline, you'll often find something shitty under the surface. And that's what sucks. As a person who has lived his entire life watching the stories of, white dudes get told, and I don't even say that as a negative, I'm just saying that as a fact. I had to find ways to enjoy those stories despite not necessarily seeing people who look like me in them. And I say that to say that that's an existence that I'm used to. So for me, I'm not going to be swayed by, a corporation's attempt at diversity if it's inauthentic, because I can do without that. I want what's real. If it's real that you want to make this movie for authentic reasons like Kevin Feige did, or you want to make this comic for authentic reasons like Bendis and Tom Taylor, that's what I want. If the real includes diversity, if that's what it is, that's what I want. But I don't want it if it's a way to make money and that's all it is. Because for me, that's not worth it. I want the world to be better. I don't want it to just look better. I'm not interested in the optics. I'm interested in the reality.
Sure.
To Peen's point, and I guess, earlier on Phil's point, we should celebrate the wins. You're absolutely right. But the fight is also not over. Mm-mm. You can celebrate, but the next day you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing for the representation and the equality and the equity that you want to see.
I think for me, it comes down to pinning praise on the right person. I think that Sean's point about not patting a corporation on the back is always correct. The companies do not care about you. They exist to make money. That's the bottom line. I think to me, if you want to look at, you and I talked about this on that episode, Sean, right? The way that John Kent's sexuality was announced, I do apply cynicism to that. But to me, if the book is good, if what Tom Taylor puts down is good and comes from an authentic place, then that's the win that you count, right? And if that comes with the context of that some suit at DC had that idea because they thought they could make money, but it resulted in authentic art that spoke to someone, I think that's part of what you have to deal with in just the world we live in, because of the way that, the barrier for making and releasing art to a mass audience is tough, and it's controlled by rich people, who, again, are those same folks that don't give a fuck about you. They give a fuck about how much they can take from you. So, that's not to say that as an excuse for any of those things. It's just, hey, there's no ethical consumption in late-stage capitalism. All companies are evil.
You heard Pete. He agrees with the Joker.
I think crime is funny.
I want to, because we gotta wrap this, but I want to end this conversation. We got away from core comics a little bit, but I want to end this conversation by sort of grading the state of diversity in comics. And as you think about this, think about, beyond necessarily the big two, what are we seeing just across the entire industry? I'll answer first, and it'll hopefully give you guys the opportunity to think about your answer. I would say that we have definitely, we're trending in a better direction. You see more representation across the board, not just in terms of the people that are creating the stories, whose names are on the cover of the book, but also the people who are, not above them, but like editors and, people who make decisions that matter with the books. So that is great. We've seen the rise of writers like Ram V, the rise of writers like Vita Ayala. No matter what you think about this person, Leah Williams, Max Visaggio. I think that there are a lot of examples of creators who 4 years ago, when we kind of we started having this conversation basically from day one on this podcast, but there are a lot of creators whose names weren't really names that are now, that have been given opportunities and that have knocked it out of the park, presumably, that have staked a claim for themselves. So I think all that is great. On the other hand, I don't think that we could have this conversation in good faith if we didn't also acknowledge that it appears that the highest ceiling is still on reserve. You look to the Substack announcements and how a lot of the people who got Substack offers, and keep in mind, not the people who have Substacks. I could start one right now. The people who got offers from Substack, who got paid in advance to do their Substack, to put their stuff out through that business, they're white dudes, like by and large. I don't even necessarily have a problem with that personally, but if we're grading, the industry, that's something that has to be taken into account. That at the tippy top, you're not seeing what you're seeing at the middle level, or even the upper mid level. And that's something that, hopefully can start to change as doors open. Maybe this crop of creators isn't the one that's going to shatter that ceiling. I think that a lot of them are fantastic, but maybe Ram V's existence, no matter how far he gets, creates a lane that didn't exist before, that allows the next Jonathan Hickman, who is, maybe a Black kid, or maybe a Spanish kid, or maybe, an Asian woman, to ascend. And for that not to be weird, and for all the rope in the world to be given to that person to succeed or fail. And at the end of the day, that's literally the only thing I want. I don't want writers or artists to be pigeonholed to working on characters that look like them. And I don't want us to be so blinded and so, singularly minded that we can't have Danny Rand anymore. I think that is an example of bad diversity. Diversity means everybody. And so we should all be represented. And that's all I want. So at the end of the day, I would say it's a mixed positive grade for me when judging the industry. And last point, the existence of more companies is better for that purpose.
Yeah. The example that I was going to give was Ramvi, and I think the other person there, Jeremy Holt, most recently, who is breaking out. I think there's, and the thing I think of is when I went to SPX 2019, it was just full of people of color, of people part of the LGBTQ community. It felt like the next wave of creators to sort of get the bump up. Since then, a few names from there. Not the best example, but Matt Lesniewski. He was, his books were back there in 2019, and now he was tabling himself at New York Comic Con. And like these are creators who, like, part of that class is continuing to find their way in the industry, and I think the industry is all the more better for it. So for me, like, it's a B plus, I guess. It's a positive score. I think there's more positive than there is negative because of the new kinds of companies that are growing to put comics out, the initiatives that people are taking, the continued democratization of publishing. And I think all that means that we have more opportunity for more voices and just telling different stories. And that's always a good thing in my mind. And if that was, only 2 years ago at this point. 2 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago. I can only imagine what 5 years looks like, what 10 years looks like, and that to me only continues to see a better trend.
Yeah, I'd say I generally agree. I think with what Sean's saying in terms of like where I'm at in terms of like a grade is we're definitely skewing in a positive direction. I think, you know, you compare when we started the show to where we are now, and things are very different across the board. You know, as high as Black Panther being $1 billion success to, you know, like what we said, where it's like on the ground level, a lot of up and coming people in the industry are not straight white dudes, you know, and that, you know, was not the case when I started reading comics, you know. So I think that is positive, you know, and I think that as much as, you know, those things are positive and that we have seen a lot of progress. Take it back to something Kale said, right? Like the war ain't over, you know, the fight is never over. It's a moving target, right? Because I think you'll hit a point a couple years from now where things that are taboo now will not be taboo, and there will be new things that are taboo. Or there will be things that, you know, are new ideas now that will be established ideas by then. And if companies are still lagging behind, like it's, you know, it's a constant fight, and it moves forward inches and inches at a time. And I think as long as we're moving in the right direction, that's the best that you can hope for. And the fact that there are more ways to make comics, to read them, that only makes things better. You know, like things like webtoons and, you know, some of those other alternative kind of formats and distribution channels and everything. Those are things that I think will be great democratizers, because what's the barrier of entry for you to make the #1 webtoon, right? Like your skill and, you know, luck, right? You don't need to wait for somebody to tell you yes. And I think that's the thing that is gonna be the examples that push us forward the most, is the breakout hits like that. And like Sean said, right, like not waiting for a Marvel or a DC to give you what you want, because somebody is already out there making it as a labor of love and a passion project. And, you know, throw your weight behind that.
And just adding to that piece, I think manga's the growth of manga is probably a really good example as well. Is just new creators that can enter the field. Peach Momoko, I think, coming from manga specifically and now like doing Marvel books is another really good example.
I really don't think there's much more to add at this point. From like a boots on the ground standpoint, things are improving. It's the stuff behind the scenes I don't know about, but things are, you know, objectively improving in this regard. I don't know how you would grade it. I mean, there's still ways to go. There's a long ways to go, but yeah, things are improving.
Yeah, quickly, I think the thing that hasn't been mentioned that is also a very, very good sign is the gatekeepers are fewer and fewer. You know, the Sean mentioned, like, you know, the Substack guys who got the big deals, you know, were predominantly white guys, but, you know, Scott Snyder has actively championed, you know, his students and, you know, people who have come, you know, behind him. You know, he's helped he's kept the ladder down, you know, for people like James Tynion and Marguerite Bennett and Vita Ayala. And, you know, these are white men, they're white men who mostly, you know, are still doing the bare minimum of teaching and helping the field grow. And I think that's a very, very good sign for the future.
Yeah, I think so too. And I hope that, you know, if you take away anything from this conversation, it's that you should think critically about what you allow yourself to become attached to. and always remember that as cool as Superman and Batman are, there are some less cool people, not always, but certainly, throughout history, who, control what that character can and can't do, can and can't be, can and can't represent, and that everything you see is calculated. No matter what you think, it's all a decision that was made, and not just by one person and not by the person who's writing it. So just keep that in mind as you navigate these very tough and confusing waters. At the end of the day, we on this podcast want more diversity. I think that's clear from the conversation, and we're always going to be on the lookout for this, and hopefully trends will continue to be positive for the industry. A healthy comics industry is a diverse one. Mm-hmm. Write in with your thoughts about this subject. You can get us all over the place. Follow us, leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Make sure that if you are listening to us on YouTube, youtube.com/thecomicspals, you have subscribed to our channel. If you are a listener and you have not subscribed, please head on over there and do that. We're a few subscribers away from 500. We really love to get there before we close out the year. So let that be your gift to us this year, this Christmas, this Thanksgiving. Listen to our comic book reviews every Wednesday. We do our image stuff every Thursday. We do everything else. So check that out if you want our thoughts about Inferno or anything else that we've been talking about. All you Spawn lovers, we've got Spawn on deck this week on our image reviews. And make sure you tune into our Eternals review next week. We're doing the review of the film, and our book club is out now on Neil Gaiman's Eternals. Let's get into the plugs. Pete.
Thank you guys for joining us here on another episode of the Comics Pals. If you want to connect with me, I'm at @loud_Pete on Twitter and Instagram. Come chat with me about whatever you're checking out these days. Always open for a recommendation. If you want to get some more stuff from me, you can check out my band, Long Friend, Time Friend, wherever you get your music. If you like noisy punk rock, we're a good band. Go check us out. And then if you want to check out my video game podcast, head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website. We got links to everywhere we are. Go give it a listen.
All right, Kill.
You're muted.
Muted. I sure am.
That's it. You lose your plugs. No plugs this week.
Plug your shit every listen, every
kidding.
Goddamn week.
I'm sorry,
every
Kale.
time.
It was just
every
a bit.
Fucking time. Every fucking time. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at TotoInto. That's TOTOINTOW. You can find my work at kaleward.com. That's CALEWARD.com.
Marco.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Mr. Marco Enomoto. Come talk to me about. I've been reading a lot of risque novels.
Of course you have.
Yeah. Come talk to me about the sexy mangas.
Just gonna put that out on Front Street, huh?
Sure is.
What am I gonna do? Lie?
He has no shame.
No shame.
Boy. Phil?
So I gotta tell you, I always thought Hydra was an evil company, but when they changed their Twitter icon to have rainbow colors, I thought, you know what, Hydra might not be that bad. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Cyborg Bebop. I just saw Dune, which is a terrific motion picture. If you want to talk to me about that,
Doom.
Yes, MF Doom, the supervillain, RIP. Yeah, so talk to me about MF Doom or the movie Dune. Your call.
As for me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram only at Sean Soapbox. I also saw Dune and did not think it was all that. Yeah, so if you want to drag me for that opinion, at Sean Soapbox. With that, we're the Comics Pals signing off. Until next week, take care, guys.
See you next time.
Yo, Pete, you getting paid for being devil's advocate?
Yeah, dude. The devil pays great.
Damn, I gotta get on that.
Oh, he won't let you in. You're a Christian.
My man gets paid in the devil's lettuce.
Oh.